We will call the special meeting of the Calaveras County Planning Commission to order at 1:03-ish. And go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any staff announcements or agenda changes this afternoon?
None, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we do not have any consent agenda items, or any regular agenda items. So we will return to our continued informational item discussion of the county zoning ordinance update.
Public comment?
We don't have public comment on here, but
Okay.
obviously we'll let anybody speak to the items we're discussing today. Annette, is there anybody online?
Yes, Mr. Infacino.
Okay, I'm sure he plans to speak to the items on the agenda today.
Correct.
Okay.
And Martha's here.
And Martha's here. That's what I was just going to ask next, but there she is. All right. Where would we like to pick up? Does anybody have a?
Aren't we at the environmental?
Yes, we are, 17.07.
We are on 17.07, but we also have this information in front of us that is
Review?
follow-ups. And maybe we should clear some of those follow-ups.
We can, yeah. So, kind of noisy today. So over the last previous two study sessions, my notes indicated that we had some little clarification things that you were asking for. And so what I've provided for you is, let's see, one of the questions that you had was in regard to the new residential uses that we've included in code that weren't previously enumerated in code. And I believe the question was, are these in relation to the housing element? And through my research, the answer is yes. So I've provided for you the different references in the housing element program relative to co-housing, zoning for farm worker housing, single room occupancy, and group homes, or also known as in our code as residential care facilities. So if you have any.
I have,
Yeah.
question. Is the word farm worker defined anywhere?
Is it defined in?
I mean, like, would it apply to a
By the
cannabis
state.
plantation?
I'm sure that they probably have a definition. If I don't have it, if you'd like me to get it for you, I can.
It'd be nice to be used.
Unless Martha's got it in her back pocket. Yeah.
She's
I don't have it right in front of me.
Yeah,
Yeah, the state has very detailed provisions for this type of housing, so we can provide that, but rest assured, the state is very kind of detailed in that regard.
Martha, does it only apply to agricultural, or would it also apply to like cattle? If you had housing for your ranch workers or whatever, would that be the same?
I believe working on the ranch also is included as farm worker, but
Right.
again, I don't have that definition right in front of me, but I believe it.
It would be the same.
Yeah. I think they refer to farm as agriculture in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, of course, we're used to saying, a farm is crops and orchards and, ranching is livestock. But I believe what I've seen is the term farm is just a general term for agriculture. But I can go ahead and bring that back.
But then
And-
we'll have the question as this agriculture as currently used does not include cannabis farms.
Right,
Just gonna say.
correct.
So
Correct.
that would be good to know whether
No, it
Workers
does,
on a campus
it does
farm.
not.
does not.
No. As a matter of fact, you know what? I think I might have the definition of agriculture.
Well, it's,
Hang on, because we did a little research for something else. I might have it in here.
With cannabis, I also just want to point out that to the extent it's state law that would apply for this type of housing, the state's choice to treat cannabis as ag would take precedent if that in
If
fact
that
is the
happens.
case. So we've chosen, because we have a variety of things in the zoning code that are related to ag, we've chosen to not give those same benefits to cannabis farmers for a variety of reasons. But again, for purposes of state law, we would be deferring to whether the state includes that.
so that,
Yeah,
there would be a question here as far as
okay.
whether.
I don't have it with me. I've got it back in the office because we did look it up. So when we take a break, I can probably run back to the office and,
But it's
Bring it back.
farm worker that we're
Yeah.
really
right, okay.
interested in.
And maybe I'll just shoot a text to somebody in the office and they can look it up for me. If I have a number. Actually, I don't have his number. Now that I'm thinking about, we'll
And
get
I
it done.
can add that
We'll get it
question
done.
about the farm workers.
Yeah.
And cannabis to my list of questions.
Yeah,
and
we'll bring it back as follow-up.
Perfect.
So the other question was in regard to whether or not we should include crematories in the definition for funeral parlors and interment services. So I reached out to our county coroner, and Kevin Raggio gave me some really good feedback. Basically, they are of the opinion that it is absolutely a separate use, that it should not be included in the same definition. He said there currently are no crematories in Calaveras County, which I think we kind of all knew, but that's confirmed. He said currently those types of services are all done out of county. Primarily, they take bodies to Jamestown. There's a crematory in Jamestown. They have, the coroner has wanted to actually build a crematory here in Calaveras County, and asks that we don't regulate it to the extent that it won't be feasible for them to do so. But they haven't actually submitted an application of any sort, so.
Well, I would suggest if we're not going to include mortuaries with funeral parlors,
Right.
that our definition on page 102, which talks about care, preparation, or disposition of human remains, that we should have a statement there that says, does this definition or does not include
Crematories,
crematories.
correct.
Crematoriums or composting facilities.
Right, and so in addition to that, I just kind of just generally asked about the process, what potential impacts would be associated with it. And they basically said the process generates no smoke, no noise, no smell. They said they're located all over the place in residential neighborhoods, located in industrial complex, near sports and recreational facilities. He says they're all over the place and most people don't even know they exist. So they are controlled by the Air Quality Control Board, and he said they give off very few emissions, and that if you have any further questions or want any further details, he would be happy to come to a study session and talk to you about the topic.
If they are so innocuous, you wonder why not include them as a possibility with the funeral parlor.
Right.
that would be a question.
You know, but
I mean, apparently he has strong feelings that they shouldn't.
he had very strong feelings about the definition. Now,
Wonder if it has something to do with the
Well,
licensing.
I think from what my kind of understanding was that when you use the term crematory, he goes, it's very scary to people, and it kind of freaks him out. So he says, you know, for the most part, there really aren't any impacts, but people just get really upset about that kind of a thing, and they don't want it, you know, in certain places. And so I think if you join the two, then that's going to make it difficult for you to place a funeral parlor, you know, because there might be the possibility of a crematory associated with it. So I think if we separate them, then, you know, and even if you call them out, you know, in similar zones, as long as they're not together, and maybe if you feel strongly enough, you know, a use permit. So what do we allow them right now?
They're not even
I think they are a use permit, are they not?
No, they're not listed. Commissioner Ladish, I think the reason is because you could have one without the other. Most places that offer funeral services don't necessarily have crematoriums, and places that offer that service do not have the type of funeral parlor service that you would have. So it would just be a final place where, after you've gone through the funeral service, you know, the body's taken there and they perform that particular
Which is
function.
what's happening now.
Right. So,
But I go back to the fact that we ought to make clear, since the way that the funeral parlors and interment services are defined, if they talk about preparation or care, preparation, or disposition of human remains, we should make clear in another sentence that says that this does not include
C section.
crematories.
Right,
Yeah.
we can do that.
Crematoriums
Or
and
human-
composting
We can do that.
facilities.
So do you want to discuss, do you want us to come back with a separate definition and a revised definition for funeral parlors? And then a new definition for crematories before we start talking about where you want to place?
Yeah, I
The
think so.
Okay.
I like that. The
right.
definitions are usually a good place to start.
Okay,
And where do you want this thing?
right.
But as the chair remarks, human composting should be
Included. all
included
in
somewhere with a crematory.
I mean, it's,
I suppose we could find something, did not seem to be in favor of that in any way. I mentioned it and they,
yeah, but it's a
but,
separate business.
Sure,
and
Common
sure.
thing.
It's not, yeah,
Sure.
it is a coming thing.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Going
for
thing.
sure.
Yeah.
Or going thing. And if we're looking ahead, we should at least address it, even if we have to update it in the future.
And we'll prepare a definition for crematorium, and just going on with the kind of theme of how we're updating the use classifications or definitions of uses. Crematorium is really about, or the definition we have will be for kind of the preparation or disposition of human remains, not necessarily calling out all the specific different ways that may happen, because just like you said, there may be some approaches or some methods that may or may not be acceptable. So you don't want to just be so specific in calling everything out, but we'll,
Including but not limited to or something.
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
So somebody who Googles it will at least come up with something for crematorium. Cremation.
so, moving on, I gave you, what I was hearing from you is that, you really wanted a list of uses that are currently allowed in the M4 zone. And the way it's enumerated in code is rather difficult because it keeps it keeps directing you to other sections of code. So I printed all those out for you. And basically residential uses, other than a caretaker, are not allowed. So I went through and I struck out all of the residential uses, just so you understood that those were not included, just to give you an idea of all the things that currently encompass that M4 zone, which is quite a bit of stuff. But, you know, I mean, once you start looking at the different commercial zones, a lot of those are overlapping too.
Right,
So,
This is-
that's what I was noticing.
yeah.
This is where your current, the proposed way of presenting the
Oh.
zoning code with the tables.
Much nicer.
Is much nicer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Especially because when you're scrolling, looking at it online, you sometimes don't realize you've moved into a new section. You're like, wait a minute.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you want to revisit M4, if you guys want a little time to digest that and maybe come back to it at the next study session. You know, it's up to you.
I don't need to spend time on it.
Okay, all right, moving on then. So the next thing that we had a question on was, emergency shelters and emergency housing. So they're actually two different things. So we call out emergency shelters in the current code, basically for, housing for the homeless. But then we have a whole nother section in code that refers to post-disaster recovery.
But
And-
the current code includes person needing emergency housing due to a disaster or other similar situation, which you've quoted to us. The current 17.060793, and that's been taken out. And then I understand that provisions having to do with that, emergency housing due to disaster is somewhere in countywide regulations
Yes,
we're going to get to. I would suggest that in our definition in the back of, let's see, in 17.13020, emergency shelter, since I think we should have a statement that does not include shelter for persons needing emergency housing due to a disaster or other situation, and then cite to wherever that's now going to be covered. Since the current ordinance does include that, it's probably a good idea to separate that out from the definition. Just emergency shelter, and which I realize is the term used by the state. I think first of shelters due to emergencies, not people that need emergency. We're in an emergency situation and need shelter. So I know we are stuck with the state's approach of calling the homeless shelters emergency shelters, but I think we ought to steer people to where they can find any provisions
The
having to do with.
disaster shelter. He just wants a reference
Yeah.
to, this doesn't include the short-term shelter during a
Due to disaster.
local emergency or disaster, and that this is where you can find that information,
Yeah,
Got it.
which makes perfect sense to me.
good. Martha's got it? We're okay. We can move on.
Okay. So now we are at 17.07.
And as I remember, we were looking at ways to rewrite 17.07.030A. And Julie was trying to draft as we were talking.
Yeah.
very late in the
We
afternoon.
had to decide what our goal was here. Like, how restrictive is this intended to be?
Can I cut back to a concern that might, if we take care of this concern, it might help on this
Okay,
particular. I was looking at this, I don't see anywhere any statement, or maybe we have an ordinance in some other location, that deals with the actual, who designates, with the designation of the zone and the resource identified for protection. It seems to me we need, after the purpose section, we need a section that talks about how this comes about. How is the zone designated, who designates it, and how is the resource identified for the protection? Once we get that, I think it makes it a lot easier to deal with the rest of us.
I think it's because like we were talking last time that we have two situations really. We have a situation in which you are looking at a large piece of property and doing studies, and then the result of that will be an EP overlay zone on a portion of the property. And then we have existing properties that have already been evaluated and already have an EP overlay on them, right?
Yes.
Shouldn't we have something in here saying how the zone is created? I mean, you just
I just,
told me.
yeah.
But
It's good.
if we have you in our back pocket.
Exactly, I'm not there when people are reading.
Yeah.
So if I could offer, and Gina and I touched base on this, because I know I wasn't at the meeting, but similar, just along those lines, we talked about, what it really needed was, after purpose, was an applicability section.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we haven't worked out the specific language for that. So when you get the next version, we'll have some language in that, but it will try and clarify kind of exactly what you said, where studies are, have been,
Great.
conducted, and this has been found. And yeah, I think we're on the same page as far as that. We just haven't developed the language to
Great.
be reviewed.
But we do currently have a purpose section for the EP combining zone, which you would find in existing 17.58. So if you're looking for the purpose of it, it's already stated in the code.
Yeah, but the purpose is to designate. That's great. How do we designate? Who designates? What is it?
I think maybe if we said to identify instead of designate, because once it's on there, it's been designated, correct? This is, if you
Well,
see a piece of property and it says EP on it, it's already been identified.
Yeah. But
So-
well, let's see what they come up with on applicability and maybe.
Oh, we're talking about this wording right
No, I know,
here.
I know.
So Gina, theoretically, and Martha, if that piece of property hasn't been designated, but there's as an overlay zone, and unless you do have a biologist come in and do some kind of environmental study, it may not be identified on that piece of property, correct?
Correct.
Right. If it's allowed by right and you're not
Right.
needing to get any
Right.
discretionary permits.
Right.
But that still doesn't take away from the fact that if it has an EP overlay zone, it has been identified.
It has been
Yes,
identified.
yes.
Yeah.
So are we really just talking about property that has already been identified? Or and so once, even if we're not talking about that, once a piece of property has been identified, then this would apply.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
How do you go about identifying?
Yeah.
Or designating?
Well,
so the application has been applied for, the technical studies have been done. The technical studies will provide us with, a conclusion and a recommendation, which then will result in, either, significant impacts, identified in your CEQA document, or potentially, hopefully mitigated. But whatever the result of that is, then if it's significant enough that it needs to be protected, then we'll apply the EP overlay to that portion of the project, which indicates, there is something here that is some resource here that needs to be protected from future, development.
Or further studied and mapped.
Exactly, because I have seen that. So, they'll do some surface, evaluation of a site. They'll identify certain things. They'll put the EP combining zone on it. And then the recommendation from the specialist, the professional, whether it's biological, archaeological, whatever, they will actually require future studies, mainly like subsurface studies in most, you'll see that obviously through your archaeological resource studies and cultural resource studies, basically saying, yes, we identified something, but if you want to know how significant that is, you need to do subsurface studies. And I've seen that language in those technical studies that are on file in our office.
But isn't it, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I'm not meaning to cut you off, but once Martha and Gina says, we're working on it, we'll come back to you with something.
Sure. We can have the further discussion.
Okay.
But I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I think Martha and Gina, I think, if an area has been identified, if it's for a public use, then that's gonna generate studies. If I were to go out and buy 1,000 acres someplace, and that land had not been designated, or it wasn't in some kind of overlay zone already, because there are certain things, like with the salamander, there's a range. And
Right.
If a piece of property falls within that range, it's already been identified. So, I guess my question to you is, what are the chances of this happening to a privately held piece of property if it wasn't already identified?
None, unless
None,
you
right?
apply for
Right.
a discretionary permit.
I mean, if you were a landowner and I don't know what you're doing, but for some reason you think there's some resources out on your property and you hire yourself a professional and they come out and they say, yes, this is right here. And you want to somehow protect that from future development, I suppose you could file an application with the county to rezone your parcel, to overlay that, provide us with the documentation, meaning the technical studies, and we could overlay that for you upon application. But generally speaking, it comes to us in the form of a discretionary application, most commonly a subdivision.
So, yeah, exactly.
Because,
If somebody already owns 1,000 acres and the state discovers that there's such a thing as the green-throated frog salamander, and
Yeah,
that needs
exactly.
protection, until the state has slapped a protection zone on it, is that person, because of his prior use, can he continue doing whatever he's doing with the waterways and that sort of thing?
Even when the state identifies those and says that they're gonna protect the habitat, they don't come back into, there has to be something that triggers
Okay.
being looked at
Yeah.
again.
right.
In my experience.
And that's, I think, more for us than anything, because it says, the county took action. So we were responsible for reviewing a discretionary application. We did, technical studies. There was an environmental document that was done, and we identified something.
Yeah.
And we, the responsible agency, are protecting it by putting this overlay zone on it.
But
Now, I
you
mean,
don't-
even absent this, it doesn't mean that landowners can just, destroy habitat that happens to be in,
Endangered Species Act,
I mean, there's
protect it.
state and federal law that everybody has to comply with regardless of the EP combining zone. That's more or less for us saying we did our due diligence to identify that there's something out there.
But we would only do this zone in response to
That's right.
Request.
Higher
We
Right.
would only do
Yeah,
something
we-
in response to
right.
a request.
Right.
request.
yeah,
That's right.
okay.
What I find for me, and I didn't have a lot of time to look at this, is, so if we have a discretionary application, you have to look at CEQA.
Right.
So it would be difficult to separate this
Right.
from the CEQA
Right.
Yes.
process. I'm just saying they kind of run.
Exactly. This is
Together.
going to be the result of some
It would-
kind of environmental evaluation in response to an application of some kind.
Correct.
The only other time I could foresee is if somebody is literally wantonly out there grading their property that they are claiming is agricultural and not subject to any permits, and they are destroying wetland areas or,
Right.
yeah.
But there's laws, that are protecting those areas besides this.
Exactly, right.
And so there's lots of other agencies, including Public Works, that are overseeing all of this.
I mean, it
And
almost seems to me with federal legislation and local and state legislation, having this overlay zone, to me, doesn't seem absolutely necessary. Because every single property that we have in our county, when you go to our GIS mapping system, you can figure out all the layers of regulations about endangered species and things of that nature. So there's really no significant advantage in having this overlay zoning, because this overlay zoning doesn't stand alone outside of the federal Endangered Species Act, some other state acts, CEQA, and all these other things that we're required to do anyway.
It's absolutely necessary, because if it's been identified as part of a subdivision, then the person who buys a parcel in that subdivision is aware that a portion of
Right.
it, and we see those projects here all the time, where there has been previous mapping of an
Right.
area and
And
they
it,
know.
and
they
it just
can't-
doesn't apply to biological resources. It applies to archaeological, cultural resources as well.
Yeah,
Right,
but
and
we,
so
but we
even if
require
you were
those.
doing something that is allowed by right, like a new home on a parcel in a previously created subdivision, that previously created subdivision may already have areas mapped on it and overlaid, and you know that you will not be able to build within
Okay,
that
the
area.
point I'm
And you
making
wouldn't
is-
normally have to go look at the property again.
The point I'm making is that the process of subdividing the parcel itself has to go through a review process that requires all the analysis for archaeo, bio, et cetera, et cetera. So you already have that. Besides, if a subdivision that requires CEQA, there are laws regarding, archaeological digging and things of
But
that
we're
nature.
talking about subsequent to that, years later, could be 20 years later. I work on parcels all the time that have previously had restrictions placed on them as a result of environmental or cultural or archaeological finds during the initial subdivision process. So if you don't have the EP overlay zone, you don't have, you're relying on somebody else to have documented it to come up in a title search or something, and it
No,
won't.
because that's all confidential. It's my understanding that those documents are confidential, that they're not, some, exactly,
Some
not all,
could
but
be.
yeah. So they're just not on file in our office or even at the state for most people to just drop in and take a look.
I think the distinction, if I could just help Mr. Elliott here, I think certainly I agree with Mr. Elliott that we don't need the overlay in order to force us to study the land.
No.
We have
Right.
other
Right.
rules that will require us to look at the land. But the overlay zone is a tool that we can employ if in studying the land, we
Well-
find something sensitive, short of prohibiting development on the entire parcel.
Yeah, it's just a way
It's
to
just-
document the findings from the process that you were
Right.
talking about
Right.
for people long in the future.
Right.
Okay, that now goes to the original question. So how does that get designated? Is that through a general plan amendment or something of that nature, which would be a tool
That's a zoning.
that
No,
would
it's a
go
zoning
to a
amendment.
planning
Just
commission?
Part of in the most common situation where they're just creating parcels for a subdivision or even just a small land split, that's when it gets applied to it. So it's just part of, they're usually changing the zoning anyway because the subdivision requires zone changes, so it's all just part of that same process. And the overlay gets applied at the same time that they determine that there are R1 parcels or RR parcels or whatever parcels there, C2 parcels, whatever
Yeah.
they become.
And I
It's
can
not just
understand.
residential.
I can understand if you're looking to buy a lot and you look at the
Right.
zoning map and gee, there's this red, purple, whatever
Right.
color
Yeah.
that's over it, that's gonna raise a question.
Yeah,
If I just happen to know that there are federal rules dealing with certain things, but I don't know if those things are on this property.
Or you think it doesn't,
It won't-
doesn't
it
look
won't
very
be-
special to me.
yeah.
Well, I'll be interested to see what you come up with.
Okay, great.
Ability.
Yeah, it seems like it's not so much this as just the timing so that you see where it came from.
And the use, under 1707-020B, the term qualified professional. I know it's defined somewhere in our codes, but it isn't right here. And I wonder if there should be some reference.
It's not enough for the neighbor to suggest.
Yes,
that
exactly.
They'd like
Well,
you to prevent building anything along the fence
He's-
line.
After all, I mean, he's a professional,
Yeah.
he's a lawyer.
Right.
Well, and that qualified professional is really gonna vary based on what is the, kind of habitat, you know, is it a flood area, is it an archaeological, is it cultural, is it a wetland, is it oak woodland? So that is actually kind of a general term, and that qualified professional, if there's a question, would, you know, the director would weigh in on that.
So we would have a definition that says some
An expert in
person,
the area.
an expert
Yeah.
in the area.
Expert in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such
And
as the final determination by the planning director.
right, and Martha is right, depending on the type of study required, for example, oak woodlands, you would find similar language, but in the definition section of the ordinance, we actually define who that special expert is. You know, somebody who has a degree in forestry, things arborists, people of that
But
nature.
does that definition apply to this usage?
No, I'm giving
he's
an
talking about
a similar example.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised if in the ordinance that actually created this particular section, which is ordinance 2345, whenever that was, may have that definition in it. So we just need to transfer it or rewrite an applicable
Or put it in
definition
the
suitable.
back?
Yeah,
Anyhow.
yeah.
Needs, I think, a little more detail.
They
Got it.
it.
Yeah. That's all. Thumbs up.
So we're gonna put this aside and
Yes.
we can come back and look at it in whole.
Okay.
So we're gonna look at 17.08 design review.
Despite its short little, description here, I think this might be a little lengthier discussion, so.
I was gonna say, this does not reflect the thought.
No, well, I have some, Martha and I have talked about it, Gabriel and I have talked about it a little bit, so I've got some additional thoughts with the rezoning of these parcels, so let's get your feedback
I have a
first.
suggestion, just as far as the language goes, just with this language. It says design review is required for uses and development within the boundaries of the design review, DR overlay zoning, mapped on the official zoning map and the following. And I think we ought to just say mapped on the official zoning map, comma, including the following. And then A is McCollum Hill, and B is other areas as adopted by the Board of Supervisors. I mean, it sounds.
If it
as if
says
there's a-
and, it sounds like McCall Hills will always apply.
Okay.
Tim,
I
could
don't-
you read that again?
Yeah, so cutting into the design review
Prescribed.
DR overlay zone
Mhm.
mapped on the official zoning map, comma, including, taking out the word and, the following, colon, and then the provision for McCollum Hill, and then B would be other areas as adopted by the Board of Supervisors, or specified, or designated, or identify, I guess, we use identify under purpose, so we should use other areas as identified by the Board of Supervisors.
The only thing I really feel like is missing here is a clarification that these design review standards would have been developed by the community in a community plan area.
Actually, what I was going to say would be, if we are going to have this overlay district, we need to describe specifically what the criteria, what the, we already have a purpose. We're saying it's a design review, but what specifically is the focus of the design review?
Well, that's going to
Because-
vary from community to community. So the McCalmy Hill Community Design Guidelines are very specific. So it goes through and identifies the historic district, it identifies the different historic structures, and then it goes through the whole history of different architectural features and lays out a process.
Yeah. And I think you would have the same thing for other,
Yeah.
Right, but they're going to vary from,
Right.
from community to community. Martha?
Yeah, so this is just the overlay, identifying the overlay.
Right.
The design review process will be in, you'll look at that in administration, which is our third kind of set that we're looking at.
Okay.
And that's where you have the criteria, findings, and any reference to any community-specific things adopted, like Gina's talking about.
So that's the pursuant to chapter to be determined you're talking about. And that'll be, what's the category, the third category?
Administration?
Administration, okay. So this by itself doesn't say, really describe what design review is, but we're
Right.
gonna get to that when we get to
Yeah.
administration. Okay?
Yeah.
I still feel like it would behoove us to reference the community because it's been such a big issue for the communities that they don't want something imposed on them.
Right, right.
So that's
So that
just a
kinda-
reference to that.
Yeah.
It can be one sentence or a few words in the sentence.
So it sounds like there's a process then, right, Michelle,
There
that
would
a
be.
community
Yes.
has to go through?
That
Yes,
should be.
there
It's
is.
not imposed by the commission or board, it really is coming from the community saying, we would like these standards.
Yeah, but
So-
We
it
want
has
to
to be,
reestablish our or establish a community plan,
Right.
and we want that community plan to have a design review
Right.
Exactly.
component.
Right.
Right.
it has to be in the community plan.
Right.
So we're just not pulling something out of the air if
Right.
it's not in the community plan. And also, we also need to be aware of any legal parameters regarding how far a design review actually, what effect a design review does have on a particular project. Because I think we brought a project in front of you not too long ago about a campsite of sorts in a commercial zone.
Well, the art.
And so there are some limitations as to what even the planning commission can do under those circumstances. So we need to be aware how these things kind of interconnect, so we're not giving false hopes about anything.
So Michelle, are you suggesting that there should be some added language talking about how design review overlay zone comes about?
No, I think that Martha's saying that all of that detail will be in another section. I am just saying, just a reference to a community developed
Yeah.
Well, that's what I
guidelines is
meant.
all. It's as much political or just acknowledging respecting the
Right,
efforts of the
right.
community in adopting this.
Well, and you need to recognize where those areas are, which kind of leads me to the next discussion is that, so as a result of the, of what we're proposing with the PD overlay, is that we are proposing to separate the traditional plan development from the design review component of the plan development, which is horribly confusing. And so our thought is everything that was zoned PD for the purpose of design review would roll over to a DR, but with the understanding that only one community in the entire county currently has design guidelines. Those parcels are already with the DR combining zone, or, excuse me,
Right.
overlay zone. Would you recommend that instead of identifying the design review PD and rezoning it to a DR, regardless of whether or not there are design guidelines adopted for those individual communities, which we happen to know they're not, would it be better if we just simply eliminated the DR for those base zones altogether, and then upon whatever time in the future, the members of the community plan areas that don't have design guidelines want to come forward with design guidelines, then they can also come forward with a proposal to rezone.
I'd go for your second alternative.
Yeah.
When do we get public comment here?
Just a moment.
Okay.
So I would be in favor of continuing to identify in some manner, whether it's this or something different, communities that have a community plan boundary, whether or not they have a current community plan.
And we already have that.
And then, right, so because we know that, and then identifying them as design review eligible in some way, so that,
Because I'm just wondering if applying the DR overlay to a base zone in a community plan area that doesn't have adopted design guidelines is going to create even another layer of confusion.
You're going to get a lot of calls.
I think it will.
But you could do DRE,
right,
design review eligible.
or just, yeah.
Okay, but every parcel within the community plan area, which is already delineated in the general plan, is eligible.
Can't we just put in anything that has a community plan boundary in that definition, explain that those are eligible with the community's concurrence
Okay.
But that,
for design review guidelines, and not necessarily apply the overlay on the map now?
and what about the designation DR for those that aren't in?
That's what I just said, not put the
Don't-
overlay
don't put-
on it.
Don't put the DR after.
Yeah,
the-
have it in the explanation
Yeah.
with the community plan areas, and places that have a community plan, make sure that it says that in
Right.
there. Because I do agree that I think people from out of the area who recognize the DR will immediately see that and be looking for what those guidelines
Right, right.
are.
Or looking
But we
somewhere
don't want
else.
to lose the idea that the community could develop those guidelines.
Or they might be looking somewhere else for their real estate if it has a DR, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's great. So to be covered in the administrative provisions that Martha's referring to.
So Tom, did you want to
Yes.
add to that?
Yeah, I had been mooted until just recently, so I didn't get a chance to comment on either this or the environmental protection overlay. So regarding the environmental protection overlay, I just wanted to remind and let Martha know and remind you that there was an outstanding question regarding the findings and whether the findings related to significant impacts that are directly from the project or cumulatively from this project and others combined. So there was that question that I was hoping we'd get answered. Regarding the design overlay, I feel compelled to share some concerns from the CPC on this. One is that, we've been through a process on the Highway 4 corridor in which the 2019 general plan update first removed from them their community plan protections. Those community plans did include design provisions. In Avery Hathaway Pines, we had provisions regarding landscaping of commercial properties. In Arnold, there was sign standards in Arnold. And so now, in addition to removing their community plans, you're removing the design review. And now you're saying because there were no effective standards because you removed the community plans. I want to remind people that zoning is about what's the property is suitable for today, okay? And so all of the uses we've identified, whether they be residential or commercial or industrial, we're trying to identify them as suitable at that place today. But what you're saying is, except for design review, which we're not going to have until these communities come back and do yet another community plan and another set of design review criteria. I think there's a problem here when you are zoning areas for uses, but not being prepared to do design review for those uses. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Well, I think this issue's been litigated by the community at length, and that we, despite having a few requirements on the Highway 4 corridor, parcel of Arnold and Hathaway Pines, Avery, there was not sufficient guidelines to actually allow a reasonable review. The criteria just was not specific enough, and that our zoning already requires landscaping in commercial zones. So that's already covered, whether we need a landscaping ordinance for drought tolerant plants or
We've got it.
high elevation plants, that's a whole different question, but it's a later date item, I believe. So I don't think we're actually losing anything, and we've talked, the Arnold area has talked about this over and over. We've seen project after project in which there was just really not sufficient criteria to really evaluate the project against. So they were not getting design review anyway.
Right.
And that situation is, we have even less now to evaluate. So without somebody, meaning those communities, both getting the community plans back active by developing those plans and then developing specific criteria, which the Arnold had a committee just a few years ago that worked on that for quite a while, and there was not consensus on anything.
So, the McCalmy Hill Design Guidelines it's a separate document. It's a separate document from the general plan and the community plan as outlined in the general plan, completely separated. The board appointed a committee, they drafted the guidelines, they brought it back to the board, and the board discussed it and adopted that specific document. Other communities have the same ability within their designated community plan area to do the exact same thing if they see fit.
Although I do want to say that without funding and help from the county, which the county doesn't currently have the resources to offer to those communities, it would be difficult for most of those communities to do it on their own. I know Murphy's has looked at it several times. So I do think that's a whole different issue of how do we determine what kind of a priority there is there. There are a couple communities that we know should have priority for getting new community plans adopted. But we really need to see interest from the communities, and then we need to see a mechanism for the county to help those communities develop that plan.
Madam
I
Chair,
don't think that's actually part of what we're talking about on this overlay here today.
no, it's not, but our current general plan actually does have quite a number of communities that have community plans that were adopted as part of the 2019 general plan, including Moke Hill. Corporopolis is one outstanding community that did not have its community plan adopted as part of the general plan, and we're currently going through that process at this particular time. The point I'm trying to make is, having not seen or know what's going to be in the admin section of the code, when you talk design review, we have to talk in specifics. And there has to be a focus. If the focus is on preserving the history of the community, then there has to be specific design elements that relate to that particular period of history, which means we will only allow A-frame type buildings, or, so you're going to have a palette of building materials that are acceptable. And you also need to make a determination as to whether or not that design review is going to govern the entire area of a community plan or some specific area of a community plan, such as a downtown area. So unless you have these elements in place, having design review just for the sake of having it is really, that doesn't do credit to what design reviews are designed to do.
I think that's what we're all saying, is we don't have that criteria
Right.
in place, and so there's no reason to have an overlay assigned to those parcels today.
Yeah.
But we don't want to lose the idea that communities may wish to
Right.
Sure.
reinvigorate their community plans and develop that criteria for design review.
Right.
That must be the roof.
Yeah, that is, that,
Oh,
Do they
That's-
want in or?
Or Marley's joke.
yeah, it's not the Grim Reaper.
I just, I agree with what Michelle said earlier, that right now there really isn't funding or staffing that's prioritized for community plan updates. But I think as we go forward, that now seems to make sense that if we do find places that we want to do community plans, especially on the Highway 4 corridor, that we do both the community planning and the design review at the same time. So what they get done with is a complete package, and they get their design review, at the same time. So we're not doing this, well, it took us 5 years to get the community plan and another 5 years to get the design review.
I think you have to leave that up to the community as to whether they wish to have design review or not, but I think you have to look at it at the same time.
Right.
Okay, so is there anything else on this, these
Nope.
2 paragraphs and a subparagraph?
I just think it's a slippery slope, and if it doesn't come from the community, because the community has to look what they have existing and what they perceive they want in the future. And it can't be something top down.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't,
We can't.
yeah, I think that's exactly it.
It seems like an arduous task.
Another point, and I'm not going to belabor this because we need to move on, is that we are currently working on a historic preservation ordinance that would bring into bear some of the quote-unquote design elements that we may want to incorporate in areas of the county or in specific communities that have historical significance. And through that historical preservation ordinance, we can also apply some some guidelines and standards for design and things of that nature. So, you know, it's, there's an opportunity there as well.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, moving on. Mineral extraction overlay zone.
I have nothing to contribute.
Ooh, fantastic. Moving on. Anybody else?
Well, Gina, how about in cases where we've had mine closures? I mean, if a mine is being closed and phased out, and we know it's been closed and phased out, of what significance is the overlay zone on those types of properties?
There wouldn't be at that point. I wouldn't think.
Well, I have two comments then. One is, I think it's important to maintain the overlay until the reclamation is done.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So the second thing, I kind of want to give another pitch for Director Elliott's suggestion about passive recreation on industrial lands. And I want you to think about the cement plant over in San Andreas as an example. I remember when Cliff Edson was supervisor, they were considering a recreational trail through there. I haven't been on the site, but I've been told by people who, you know, have followed the stream up there that there are, you know, scenic qualities to some of that property that would be suitable for a trail. Also, I want to point out that on other mineral lands that have been reclaimed, recreational use is often a result. I've seen there are places where some of the ponds are clean and can be used as swimming holes. I've seen the tailings mountains used for off recreational vehicle use. I've seen sand and gravel operations adjacent to the American River turned into soccer fields. So at the same time, we also talked about the importance of maintaining the industrial zoning on those sites so that, for example, if the cement plant wanted to come back as some other industrial use, you wouldn't want to have it had been rezoned open space in the meantime. So I kind of want to give another pitch for considering Director Elliott's suggestion that there may be opportunities for at least some passive recreation on industrial sites. I recognize there may be hazards. So this is, you know, when we think about a use permit, we think of, you know, protecting health, safety, welfare of the environment, peace and morals. And there may be times when you need to condition such passive uses on former industrial sites or industrial zone land to account for health, safety, environmental protection, et cetera. So if those, if we want to please consider those passive recreational opportunities with a use permit on industrial sites. That's my pitch.
Actually, a good point.
I'm going back to look. I don't think that we talked about prohibiting
No, I
them
don't-
on
I don't think-
industrial
I don't think we
sites.
have either.
We were talking about it on the natural resources on the protected
Right.
sites and only active being prohibited, allowing only passive. But, yeah, I don't see any issue with
Being passive.
a reclaimed site having passive or active recreation on it. Just looking to see if there's someplace that we need to capture that thought.
Probably,
I think we can add it to the use tables in the industrial zones.
Yeah.
While you're looking, I'd point out that the language under purpose of this overlay zone certainly would cover during the period of reclamation that the zone would continue to exist
On the overlay.
on overlay.
Yeah. Industrial zones. So Tom, you're suggesting in the industrial zone area?
As I recall, Director Elliott was mentioning that we're working on a Parks and Recreation plan, and that the consultant might find some recreational uses on some of these industrial properties, and he didn't want to foreclose the possibility that something zoned industrial could have a passive recreational use. Maybe, Director Elliott, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think
Did I
that's
make
what
this up?
we're talking about a different area, but it makes sense in the
Yeah.
industrial.
Tom, no, you're not.
Okay.
Thanks.
Because I don't see that there's even.
Well, it occurred to me that while we're talking about mineral resources, because the cement plant sort of falls into that category.
So can we just make a note when we come back to look at the industrial to
Yeah.
look for where recreation might fit in there?
Well, it has under the commercial zones, park and recreational facilities, and then it says,
Well-
Talking
it says-
industrial zone.
well, we haven't talked about industrial yet?
Yeah,
The
we
M one?
have.
Yeah,
But
we
didn't
did.
really talk about recreation.
No,
as
it's
Yeah.
part
not,
of
I don't think
that.
it's in him,
It's not.
yeah.
So we can just, so we, both Gina and I have taken notes, and I think in the revisions, we can add park and recreational facilities
Perfect.
in the industrial zones.
Perfect.
So are we thinking conditional use permit for the primary reason that we obviously want to identify potential hazards with including something like that, depending on what's around it, but, you know, I mean, yeah.
On that brown field.
I mean, it would be-
Hasn't been reclaimed yet. We should probably have a kindergarten playground.
Yeah,
We're not going to do it at the asphalt, at the
Asbestos.
asbestos plant, yeah.
yeah,
Right,
probably not.
but it's true, there's,
But yes,
sometimes beautiful areas reclaimed from mining that have
Right,
ponds and
right.
just
And
don't
it,
think you-
hiking trails.
don't stick your.
and when that industrial use is done,
Truly clean yet. But
when the
that-
industrial use is done, it would really be nice to have another option for the property.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
But I think
I agree.
conditional use permit sounds like a good.
Sure.
idea.
Yes, I agree. Good
Thank you.
point, Tom, thank you.
Okay.
Now we're gonna talk about real PD.
real PD.
Yeah, it's gonna be RPD. I have the same sort of question I had with the environmental protection zone. This, after designation of purpose, it seems to me that there's applicability or designation of PD over zone, overlay zone, or some section needs to come in here unless it's going to be handled in administration. But just reading what the purpose is and then under the designation and then, you know, what's here doesn't really get to how you give rise to a planned development overlay zone.
Well, they have to apply for it.
Same thing.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
have, they have.
Yeah,
live-
and those procedures are in the administrator.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else on that PD overlay?
Under development standards, I just have, it's the wording, and I haven't come up with alternative. Minimum area, the minimum area of a PD overlay zone shall be 5 acres. However, it really doesn't need to be. I just wonder if there's a better way of saying that, and the statement of what the board may approve if it finds, it seems to me that provides the language I'm not reading, provides a very good description of what a PD overlay zone is, that it would provide greater benefits to the general welfare of the county residents and property owners than development under a conventional zoning because of unique characteristics of the site of the proposed use. It seems to me that can be covered in administrative, describing what we're after here.
But
But have an exception to the 5 acre minimum. But
I understand what they're saying is that you shouldn't assume that you're gonna be able to get this kind of flexibility on a
Right.
less than 5 acre parcel.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if there's something
Unique,
extraordinary about your situation.
right.
But isn't that extraordinariness out of what is behind the PD zone?
No,
So,
no,
Okay.
there doesn't have to be anything.
okay.
It's just a mechanism for developing mixed use and mixed density developments.
I wonder if we ought to have a word before, with the minimum area, whether we should say the normal minimum area, whatever. It just seems, we're just contradicting each other.
Yeah, it does sound a little weird. There might be a little bit better wording, but I get the point.
Yeah.
We can work on
That's
clearing that up.
That's what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
I just raise questions, I raise problems, you solve them, that's fine with me.
And the development standards, that's kind of the typical language for this situation. That seems fine to me.
Good.
Specific plan overlay zones.
Before we go on, I have a sort of a general question. We are creating some zones now for mixed use, and we're applying them to properties in commercial areas. And we're assuming people want those or may want those because they expand their property opportunities. And last time when we described the open space district, Gina talked about considering in the future applying it to properties where people have already gotten involved with permanent conservation easements. I'm wondering if I can get people who've already done that to write in and ask you, would you put them in that district for free like you're putting the other people in those other districts for free? Or will they have to come back later?
Let's not, I would not recommend answering questions like this right now.
And this doesn't seem to be a PD thing.
Well, the concept is, we've gone so far through this, is there are zone districts that people are going to be put into for free this time,
No,
rather than having to apply, right?
But
Then it's gonna have to-
no.
PD overlay is not a zone.
No, I'm talking about the PD overlay, I'm talking about like people are going to be put in the mixed use zones, in the historic commercial zones.
No, that's not proposed. Anyone within the historic center land use designation can apply to the county to have their parcel rezoned, historic center, but the county is not proposing to rezone all of those properties within historic centers to an HC zone.
Okay, so, because I haven't looked at the map yet, but I was under the impression there were like 5,000 parcels that we're going to be,
So that includes, so we're proposing to eliminate rural commercial and rural home industry. So those parcels will be rezoned something else. The rural home industry parcels will be zoned a zone that is consistent within the land use designation. And the RC zones are all going to go to C1 because we find them fairly compatible.
Also,
Now-
RRX, right, wasn't that?
So the other zones that are being eliminated are overlay zones, and that would be the X combining zone, that would be the non-existent mobile home combining zone that was eliminated a number of years ago, and the reference to the MHP overlay zone is proposed to go away. In addition to separating the plan development, or should say separating the design review portion of plan development out of PD. So those are the parcels that are proposed to be rezoned because of what we're doing here. But we're not proposing to zone anything other than those.
And rezoning includes eliminating the PD or whatever, I mean, it's the,
Yeah, so, but.
it's not changing from RR.
No, it's not amending the base zone at all, except for those two base zones that we're proposing to eliminate, which is RM and RC. We have to zone those something else. But for the overlay zones, it's just a matter of eliminating the overlay completely from the base zone.
And I understand.
wow, and that added up to 5,000 parcels? Whoa.
Well, we're whittling that down. So, I mean, that was the initial number, but as we've done further research, like for instance, with the plan development, we didn't have time to go through and identify those true plan unit developments. And so subsequent to our initial, list, identification, I've gone back and I've identified those parcels that are actually included in those true planned unit developments. And I'm therefore creating another list of amendments, and so those will be pulled from the original list to rezone. So it's still in the works. That was just the initial, wow, this is how many parcels we've identified, but not all the parcels that we identified actually will be rezoned. So that's in the works.
And
Okay.
the notice has to go to them even if it's just an overlay zone.
Yeah.
And that's why
Right.
that's that many. But
Right.
But I also, my understanding and talking with Ms. Kathan is that the rezoned properties, those who do need to be rezoned are not being rezoned into a more intensive land use
Correct.
category.
Or more restrictive.
Well, I was just gonna say, Gina has graciously spoken to anybody who questioned that we saw here, and has offered to people that if they are one of those ones that will actually get a new zoning designation because their old zoning designation is going away.
Right.
That, and if there is some question as to whether they belong in RR or RA or whatever
Right, right.
it is, that they can talk to her and see which one is really the best fit when
Yes.
you look at this.
And that was the whole purpose of the noticing that we did, is we didn't want to blindside anyone. We didn't want them to think that the county was doing anything underhanded, sleight of hand kind of a thing. So we wanted to be upfront with folks. We wanted them to understand what was going on. And in the case of the folks that are zoned in the RM zone, we've gotten some really good feedback that, we need to talk about. And Martha and I have discussed those options, and so we'll, get that all aired out in this forum at some point. But that was the whole intent, is to try to get people's attention and get them to call and get them to talk to us about what's going on in their property, and to assure them that, that for the most part, what's going on is insignificant enough that it's not gonna change anything. But then that also opened up the additional discussion is, hey, besides the zoning, we're amending the text of your zoning code. So, there's another there's another component to all this, and we've been encouraging people to go and get online and look and read, and if they got any questions, certainly, you know, call us back, shoot us an email. So we've been getting some pretty decent feedback, and a lot of people have been contacting us.
Right, but it is absolutely not an opportunity wholesale for people to request that their zoning be modified.
And there has been that.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that message is clear.
It's clear.
Yeah.
So the second step, once we've created these new designations, whether it be open space or mixed use, the next step is for people who want to take advantage of those zoning categories to rezone their property accordingly.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, their current zoning will remain consistent with their general plan designation.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry, back to PD again?
No. I think we're skipped
all-
forward to
Okay.
Specific
with
uses.
PD.
specific plan overlay zones.
Okay, good, thank you.
I have some,
He's gonna say the same thing. Go ahead.
I have some question about the language at the very bottom of this page. I would suggest that we end the first, under residential density, end that
What-
sentence
Where are you?
at the bottom of page
Okay.
57.
57?
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
55.
Maybe 55.
Residential
Oh, I'm
densities,
sorry, yeah.
what?
I was skipping ahead.
Oh, flip back?
Now, again, I have a question. In administration, are we going to have how specific plans are adopted?
I would have to look. I don't know if we have a section on specific plans. We can stop sharing that and.
I mean, you have applicability here, but who designates it? Who?
Well, and specific plans don't always have a kind of section in the zoning code for adopting that, because that really goes, it's a legislative act that goes, kind of really follows state law, and that it goes to the planning commission and then the board of supervisors. But some do include.
I just don't see how,
It's like
if
a-
I say, I would like to have a specific plan, where will I go? Who do I talk to? Other than Gina. Gina does everything.
I don't know about
Pretty
that.
much. To the planning director, perhaps.
You know, it just seems to me that there needs to be something in here as to how a specific plan comes to be.
Yeah, so that would be in the administration section, so we can look at incorporating that if we don't already have it in there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Are these the only specific plans we have in the county? I kind of recall some discussion from the general plan that there were sites that had been previously identified for specific plans, but maybe never really implemented. All in the Copper area, I
I would
believe.
have thought
Well-
Canyon was one of them.
I want
Oh,
to
they
say,
would-
Martha, you got, this is directly from the general plan, correct?
So there are some future specific plan areas identified in your general plan.
Yep, thank you.
Not always.
And
But
then
they-
as far as my understanding is, these are the only two that have actually been adopted.
Okay.
Yeah, so this just says adopted.
Under adopted specific plans, the paragraph 1, the two sentences are inconsistent. You know, where a specific plan is silent regarding development standards, the provisions of this title shall govern. the planning director shall have authority to determine which provisions of the section apply when the specific plan is silent. Which, take your choice, or, you know, I just, without asking you to solve that problem on the spot, I'd like you to look
Got
at the inconsistency of those.
And so our general plan designation says future specific plan, but so will any parcels within that area have the specific plan overlay, even though there is not a specific plan adopted? Is this intended to only memorialize those that have been adopted?
Correct.
Okay.
So it's identified in the general plan with the cross-hatching.
Yes.
But they're not identified through zoning until we actually have a specific plan project that's adopted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Under subparagraph 3, under adopted specific plans, I think it probably should, after the comma, unless found to be inconsistent, I think it should be unless found by the planning director to be consistent, with the adopted specific plan.
Where are you?
Okay.
Item 3 under applicability.
Under applicability, subparagraph A, subparagraph 3, no discretionary entitlement applications or other permits may be approved, adopted, or amended within an area covered by a specific plan unless found, and I would just put in by the planning director.
Got it.
More power.
Yeah.
Then I have a question. We don't mention special plans. Rancho Calaveras is a special plan, and it's not even listed on the county website as where I think the county website mentions community and special plans, but doesn't have Rancho Calaveras. Should special plans have an overlay district? Because there are specific requirements that apply to all the properties within Rancho Calaveras. It just looks like special plans have not been taken up yet. I won't say forgotten.
So that subdivision is regulated through their CC&Rs, so that special plan document is basically their CC&Rs. I don't, matter of fact, I haven't even seen that document in probably 20 years.
And pieces of it are timed out.
Right. I mean, and I don't think that the document was, I mean, they were restricting things that state law didn't require them, didn't allow them to restrict, such as accessory dwelling units and.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, so I don't even, that I think is the only one that I can recall in the county. And I mean, that subdivision was created back in 1967, 68? So it's, 50.
But I think
5 years old. I don't,
okay.
But it doesn't meet the requirements of the PD, it doesn't meet the
No.
requirements of a specific plan.
No.
It's just a
It's just-
subdivision that has created its own special
So
plan.
there's
Right.
legal
Being the
definition.
CC and
Yeah.
all.
So it really,
I'm not
And I-
a fan of a special plan meaning anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A specific plan actually has. It's
Right.
a term of art, like a general
Yeah.
plan is.
okay.
yeah,
I just
Community
remember,
plans are not, that's our own.
I remember
thing.
it came up.
Yeah.
It comes up all the time.
in the-
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
general
I just don't
plan
think it's the
discussion.
thing.
Yeah, I think it's,
So it
it's,
exists, it may have legal consequences
Yeah.
for the people there.
right. But
It's
it's
not something the
not
county
something
does.
that's enforced
Yeah,
through
I
the
was gonna
county.
say, I don't think it's ours to interpret it.
So even though they call it a specific plan, I don't think it's something that we necessarily adopted. I think it's just another word for maybe CC&Rs.
So I think the county's website has the terms.
I believe you're right. I mean, I can do a little homework and check into it if you want, if you're curious, but,
It's either in or it's out, and
yeah.
if we
Well,
check,
it seems to be out. And it's not currently in, so if
But-
you're asking, should we put it back in, I would say no.
But then why have any other special plan category in the county's website?
Well, I think that's what we should look at and see,
Yeah.
should the special plan even exist as
Yeah.
a recognized term
Yeah,
Right.
right.
within the county's world of definitions?
And this is now really beside the point when you look at the county's website, a listing of community plans, it's not up to date with the current general plan.
It's not up to date?
Public comment?
If you look, just a second.
Okay.
If you look at the county's website and look up community plans, or it lists some community plans, I noticed the Sheep Ranch Community Plan, which is recognized by the general plan, is not listed. So it's just, the county's listing.
We have a separate list?
No, what should happen is that your search should actually take you to a link that identifies the specific plans that have been adopted as part of the general plan. So that's what should happen. If that's not happening, then I think we need to talk to our IT department to see.
He's talking about community plans,
Right now,
Yeah.
I'm, as I said.
Right, yeah, that's what I meant.
diverging here.
Yeah, they are.
the specific plans.
I'm sorry,
While you're
community
looking
plans.
at.
Yeah, community plans that have been adopted
Thank you.
by the general plan you should be taken to a link that leads you to those community plans, is what I meant to say.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees with you on that.
Yes,
That would be,
Yes, right,
that'd
thank
be
you.
the ideal situation.
good.
Okay. Tom, was there something you were gonna say?
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody that the Rancho Calaveras plan is recognized in the community planning element of the general plan as a community plan. And it is one of the community plans that is included in the community planning element. So regardless of whether we want to call it a specific plan or a special plan or what have you, it does have a legal designation, and that currently is community plan.
Well, but I think it's a separate document.
Yeah,
I mean, the term, there is something called the Rancho Calaveras Special Plan. I've seen
Correct.
it, yeah, and it's not what's adopted through the general plan and identified as the community plan. It's an entirely different document. And it regulated specifically things like ADUs, and the size of an ADU, and various different developments, features. And so I don't know whether or not, I'm thinking in my own mind that is equivalent to CC&Rs that just got renamed something special. But, certainly I can dig around and find out what that was. And I do, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it was adopted by the county by resolution, because there was some discussion back in the old days with Robert Selman about it not being adopted by ordinance, but resolution, and having some, whether or not it carried forward, I don't know. But
It'd be nice to.
I can dig around. I'm certain that we've got a copy of it somewhere.
I think I do. I think you can find it if you go to Valley Springs or whatever. Rancho Calaveras, say, go to Rancho Calaveras.
You can find some stuff, but it's not all actually active.
Yeah, and I don't remember, Tom, in the Valley Springs Community Plan that we approved, I don't remember if the special plan is specifically
I think it's
cited or recognized.
specifically excluded from the
Correct.
community.
It's separate, completely separate.
Okay.
All right.
Boy, you guys are asking us to remember a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
it would be really nice to just figure out what Rancho Calaveras is once and for all.
Special.
Okay,
Okay.
so are we ready for standards for specific uses?
Well, I was ready 20 minutes ago, but.
I know you were.
Good for you.
I saw you walking it up.
I had a problem with the language at the bottom of page 57. And I think where accessory dwelling units, and residential density under A, I think we should end the first sentence after the word lot, put a period there. As having the language, and any accessory dwelling unit constructed pursuant to this section does not exceed the allowable density for the lot upon which the accessory dwelling unit is located. I like your IE, accessory dwelling units do not count in density calculations, but I guess that's a little. How about this language for a second sentence? An accessory dwelling unit constructed pursuant to this section cannot by itself result in excessive density. And then back to the language, for the lot upon which the accessory dwelling unit is located.
I was thinking even simpler than.
Oh, good.
That any ADU constructed pursuant to this section will not cause the density to, the allowable density to be exceeded.
That's fine.
I'm just using less words, same thing.
Always good.
I think you and Martha can, you get the idea.
Get the idea.
Just simplify it to say the ADU doesn't count toward the density calculation, basically.
Right.
We can do that, and just a little reasoning why the language is how it is and a little funky, that really mirrors the state law text, which is why we added that.
So
We
confusing.
can do better.
If that's the case and you find that there's something there that's some idea that's important to capture, we should keep it, but
Yeah.
if we can simplify it, that'd be great.
Yeah, and we can, I just wanted to explain that, we did kind of attempt to do that.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
It's
We
not
can-
your, it's not your language, okay.
As I always tell people when I read the code to them, I don't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
You know?
So I don't want to belabor this, but if you look at B, we just, as a commission, allowed an accessory use dwelling without the building permit. So would we not have allowed that if we had adopted this new zoning? The place in Copperopolis. And we allowed for
We didn't allow an ADU, we allowed them to have a barn as their first
That's
use
not
on
considered
a
an
rural
accessory
residential
agricultural.
It's an
parcel.
accessory
So
structure.
do we need to say that here? I mean, because, you know, future commissioners sitting here reading that are gonna say, you can't. I mean, you're probably gonna be here forever, but, I just wonder for clarification if we want folks to be able to, if this is gonna be user friendly. Because that specifically says you need to have a permit to do for,
It does say accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, that's
Right.
talking about
Yeah, it's
accessory
specifically
dwelling
for
units, but I
ADUs.
think we probably need to clarify exactly that under accessory buildings at some
Okay.
point.
I do think when you get down to C1B, I did not find a definition for junior.
junior, wait a minute.
It's right there in the state law.
Well, thank you.
And this is the criteria for the junior accessory dwelling unit right here.
Is that in the next element we're gonna consider, the countywide regulations?
I'm sure
Some-
it will be in the countywide regulations, we'll be talking about, or it's
Anyhow,
What-
more detail.
if this is the only time in our code you come across the term junior accessory dwelling,
It would not be the only time
Son-
because we have ADU regulations that would
whole
also be
can we,
posted.
can we just put in parentheses, C such and such? That would be
For-
good.
For,
I'd like, on all these provisions, I think it's great to do cross-references where they would help people that are just looking at this one section, help them understand where else they need to go. You've done a great job
Got it.
of putting people together. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Oh, no, that was like a light bulb went on. I know where you're saying, the cross-reference in there.
Thank you.
And didn't we talk about hyperlinking it on the website? Yeah, that would be even
Better,
better,
yes,
more better.
more better.
Okay. I don't think,
No, here it all is. Here's all the standards for the ADUs
Right.
right here.
Yeah.
Page 59.
oh, I knew I'd read it somewhere.
And
Okay.
there's junior accessory dwelling
Yeah,
right
yeah.
there.
Yeah, okay. So the cross-reference is easy, it's on the next page.
It's on the next
Right.
page.
I knew I'd read it somewhere.
We'll just put an arrow.
I'm thrilled to see us getting this whole section updated to match the states.
It's always fun to see current going back and forth. I mean, for a while, you had to reserve parking, whatever you did.
I know.
But now you have, oh, hey.
Where can we get rid of it?
Yeah. You don't need it if you convert to accessory dwelling unit.
Public comment?
Sure.
On accessory dwelling units, there's a movement now toward tiny homes that are actually on wheels. They're mobile. I'm wondering if this would be an appropriate place to put something along the lines of, when people are building a single-family home, if they made space for just the pad and the hookup for a tiny house, so that in the event that they want to have, somebody move a tiny house onto their property, they could have it as an accessory dwelling. They would certainly qualify it from a size standpoint. And what I'm seeing older people have, caretakers come in and live in,
Yeah, I think we see where you're going, and Michelle, I'm sure you can speak to that, but there's some building code issues with that whole idea of a home on wheels.
Well, I think there's a whole, that discussion belongs as part of what we allow RVs for. And because a tiny home on wheels isn't RV. it's
Essentially an RV,
or a
yes.
Trailer. And so while I would like to find a way to allow that kind of thing in certain areas under certain conditions, I don't think it's the equivalent of an ADU.
Okay.
I
Okay, yeah,
do
the reason I
think
bring it up
it's an
is,
issue we have to
I,
address.
the thing I like about these units is when, young people starting out are buying them because they can't afford a stick-built house. Also, if you put them in an area that's subject to fire risk, they're mobile. They can evacuate their whole home from that place. And I think that's attractive. The reason I like the pads in existing communities is they essentially give people evacuating a place to move to. I live in a place I've evacuated 3 times in the last 7 years, and my very smart neighbors have RVs that they evacuate in. And it would be great if a person could evacuate, say, from West Point to San Andreas, rather than, West Point to Stockton or something like that. So I just see them as a future way of dealing with affordable housing for young people and for housing that can evacuate from effectively from an emergency situation.
Well, I think if we can cover tiny homes without including in them Winnebagos, I think it would be a good thing to do, but I think,
that's a discussion we need to include the chief building official with, because
great.
I'm venturing to guess there's some structural issues with those in relation to more of a short-term versus long-term, housing situation. Obviously, your term Winnebago or recreational vehicles aren't really built for permanent occupancy.
Well, and there would be more.
And so it's questionable as to whether or not the tiny home is built similarly, or whether or not it's built in a different way that you could in fact
And also-
call it more of a long-term. But I don't think that's really a discussion for today. I think
Today,
we,
but
Yeah.
it would be great, since we're
Sure.
redoing everything,
Right.
it'd be great to consider that. And not that I'm against Winnebagos, but neighbors would have a different reaction to having
Oh, sure.
a tiny home, as I picture it,
sure.
on the next door lot, and to having a 24-foot Winnebago.
Right. I was just bringing up the idea that if you had a pad, if people in urban areas had a pad in their yard already, it could be used for one of two purposes, one being a tiny home and two being emergency evacuation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all part of that bigger discussion of, do you allow people to put movable dwelling units on their property with some kind of constraints on what kinds of hookups are available to them? And is the length of time limited? Like, we do allow people to live in an RV, but we limit the length of time.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think it's a bigger discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
that, just saying, well, tiny homes are okay because they're cute and
Yeah.
RVs aren't,
Yes.
isn't a
No.
sufficient legal.
I'm venturing to guess those people that spend somewhere like in the neighborhood of $200,000 on their massive motorhome will beg to differ.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow.
There's some very expensive, very nice motorhomes out there, but yeah.
As vehicles, they can be visually interesting.
And there's, I think that there's a place for it that we should be looking for also in like mobile home parks, or a lot of people who live in those want to live 6 months and then move on to someplace else. So do we say that the only place for them is a RV campground, or is there some other possibility? But that's a big
That's a
different
big discussion.
Yeah.
If it's something we can cover, it would be good to cover the tiny
Yeah, I
homes thing.
agree.
And thank you, Tom, for bringing it up.
Well, I heard the need to have the chief building official present. Are we prepared to do that in one of our upcoming days here on the schedule, on the calendar?
We need to figure out where it fits into this discussion, and ADUs is probably not it.
Okay.
Although someday it might be, who knows?
Well, I think as staff, we can have a discussion as to whether or not we want to include that possibly now, or whether we want to just look at it
I
in the
think we
near
want to
future.
talk about the whole thing and then in what zones that
Right.
might be allowed.
Right.
And I can see that it could become a big discussion with a lot of opinions on what's
Oh,
appropriate, not,
I'm envisioning the same, so.
yeah.
And just from my experience, a lot of communities are kind of talking and considering the same thing, and it is a lot to consider. And it is a larger discussion, and I would strongly recommend you taking that on kind of separately, because it's very involved and there's a lot to think about and consider.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And since we haven't even begun that kind of research and discussions, I think it's going to be too lengthy for us to include it in this, because we really need to get this
Yeah. Okay.
done.
But file it away.
Sure, well, Not forever, but yeah.
So Martha, under H2, A and B, are those state regulations for the minimum water?
No, these, I believe, are actually from your existing,
Environmental health, you set the standard? Okay.
I'm sure they're based on some,
Use.
yeah, well-accepted standard.
Mhm.
It's the kind of thing we say all the time when we allow something, and it has to meet these standards.
And is there some reason why if the accessory building would require fire extinguishers or sprinklers if the primary? Are we assuming that the accessory building is a livable space? Is that the reason?
It's a dwelling.
It's a dwelling?
Yes.
So it's like a,
It's a
In-law.
small dwelling.
Yes.
okay.
Mother-in-law
Not a
unit,
brother-in-law, okay, so I'm thinking
Yeah.
maybe a garage or a workshop, but
Yeah,
it's,
yeah, that's an
No.
accessory.
that's an
building.
accessory.
This is an accessory
Dwelling.
Well,
yeah, it's an actual residence.
Yes.
You get the D, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now I understand, thank
And
you.
the state has, so if the primary house has a fire sprinkler system, then the accessory dwelling
Dwelling.
unit needs one because the water is available.
Right.
If the primary house doesn't, they waive it under certain circumstances for the accessory dwelling unit because they are trying to eliminate as many stumbling blocks to people adding dwelling units as they believe is safe.
Any more about ADUs, or are we moving on to agriculture, homestay, and dude ranches?
I'm willing to move on because I think most of this is really defined by the state anyway for the ADUs.
The only suggestion I make is the title itself. When reading agricultural homestay or dude ranch, sounds like it's two synonyms. I would just say agricultural homestays and dude ranches. As you start the sentence.
got it. And Gina, I believe these are really the current standards carried forward.
They must be.
It seems like such antiquated language. But people know what it means. Yeah. Nothing jumps out at me about this. I think it'd be, do we have anybody doing this in the county that you
Doing-
know of?
Doing
Not that I know of.
dude ranch.
I knew of one agriculture homestay. I don't know if they're still in operation.
Is it like a bread and breakfast then, or is it just?
No, it has to be, the people have to be participating in the activity, the
Right.
agricultural or ranching
Yeah.
activities. So, you know, you go to learn about,
Well, like medical,
Growing
like if
wine.
you, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Pruning or picking.
Right.
yeah,
I
like,
mean, you would guess, staying guests would then participate in the agricultural activity. So, I mean, if you were
like shearing
in
the sheep.
shearing the sheep, or if you were, if you were in pruning season, and you would participate, and they would probably go through various, practices and explain why and that kind of thing. So it's a teaching
Right, if you're
opportunity.
doing restorative farming, you're
Yeah.
showing people how you rotate your crops, and
Sure.
how you manage your water.
And it may include, say, for instance, if you're growing peaches, it may include canning those peaches
Right.
and how to preserve the fruit, kind of a thing. So, I mean,
It's
it's,
like a
yeah,
teaching school.
sure.
Yeah. It's not the Dude Ranch in Nevada.
Yes. Yeah, we don't have a zone for that.
Well,
Okay,
The next one's gonna,
animal keeping,
Yeah.
here
Oh,
we
boy.
go.
here we are. Is this new? I didn't. see-
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
here's,
So,
maybe instead of orange at the top and for the title, it should be in red.
in red?
I think we're gonna get some controversy on it.
Well, I would suspect so as soon as, we've been trying to point people in this direction as we're talking to them on the phone. And usually people are just, very forthcoming with all kinds of information that's, they're just throwing it out there, so kind of our reasoning behind this is one of the most, common phone calls we get in complaints is, I live on a small acreage and my neighbor has got, 20 head of cattle on 3 acres, or they've got, 5 horses, 3 pigs, 15 goats and chickens running all over the place, and the place is nothing but a pigsty, and there's flies and they don't maintain. And so our thinking is, and this is kind of a touchy, topic, because a lot of, obviously, people are moving up here and they don't stop to think that maybe 3 acres is not enough acreage to actually have the numbers of animals that they intend to have.
And it's just very hard to cover everything you should cover.
It is.
I mean, like sheep ranch is open range.
Right, right,
And so you might have 20 sheep that sleep on 1 acre.
sure.
But they have the community
Right.
to,
And frankly, there's some communities that just don't have a problem. Even if you're on smaller parcels, it's a common practice. Everybody agrees with it. There's not any issues. People keep their animals well and there's no complaints. But there's other areas of the county
oh, yeah.
that are receiving complaints on a regular basis.
Sure.
And right now, our code allows accepted farming practices nearly in every zone. And if you look at the definition of accepted farming practices, that includes livestock. And so, we tried to come up with something that we thought was reasonable, trying to not further regulate those youth-oriented projects such as 4-H and FFA, understanding that there are, kids that will participate in that activity that might live, in an area of the county that might be, zoned or have a smaller parcel.
But we had
So we tried to come up with our first, kind of initial thoughts about what we think it needs to look like. And this is a jumping off point.
I think, it's hard to think of everything, for sure. I mean, I
It
think
is.
you've done a magnificent job of trying. But we had an example the other day of the 2 women that have their pork-
Exactly.
pot-bellied pigs.
And I spoke with her specifically, and I directed her to this section of code, and she was upset, and as we're talking this out, I said, you have an existing situation. I said, with these changes, you know, unless animal control finds that you're negligent and you're not maintaining your animals in a healthy manner, that's an entirely different matter. But, you know, if you have established your property with this use, I said, this change is not going to affect
Yes,
you.
but
But,
we should be able to, people who want to have sanctuaries for pot-bellied pigs probably should not in the future.
well, and that's the thing, because we get a lot of phone calls. Oh, I'm mainly from realtors. I've got a client that wants a piece of property and they want to have X, Y, and Z. And, you know, and the parcels that they're providing us, you know, as reference, and we're looking at these parcels and we're going, gee, they're awfully small. They're zoned R1. I don't recommend that this is really an appropriate place for you to have 5 horses. So that's the kinds of conversations we're having with people right now. So where I don't think it necessarily affects people that are here and established, but it does have an effect on those people that are coming into the county that are looking for properties specifically for these reasons. And it's our feeling that they perhaps need to start looking for larger pieces of property that can sustain the numbers of livestock in which they're talking about.
But, I mean, back to a sanctuary. I mean, that you're having rescued animals or something. And you might have a situation where the owner knows they have to rely on feed, not grazing.
Right.
And so
Well-
you have, you know,
But you have to ask yourself, is that appropriate in a residential neighborhood?
well, but
I mean, the more acreage you have, the more allowances you have.
let's get to that. I mean, when you get to subsection E, domestic animals, general forestry, timber preserves, A1, AP, RA, and RR zones. And then all these things under E, I mean, we're not talking about R1 there, and yet we could have people that want to have responsible animal husbandry activities on a smaller unit. I mean, and just saying pigs, that do we need to say pigs of normal size or pigs? I mean, I agree, 5 pigs on 1 acre is a lot of pigs if we're talking about huge pigs. I guess what I'm doing is I'm sympathizing with your task, and I don't have great suggestions on what to do about it. It's just that I think we're gonna have a bunch of special circumstances come up, and maybe that's where we get around to CUPs or AUPs or whatever. Because just having what some people might see as draconian standards is not gonna make sense in every case.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
and if I can just jump in, I think that is something that we miss. We can add kind of something there, you know, additional, you know, animals may be kept with the approval of either an AUP or a CUP, but allow some consideration on those case-by-case basis. So we can add that, and then as far as the other standards, I think exactly what Gina is saying, we tried to come up with something that, you know, would reasonably ensure or, you know, address potential compatibility concerns. So you may want to expand or contract the zones and the number of animals in each one of those. But for those special cases or those special considerations, I do think we can add, you know, something in for that, for consideration of those.
also, I think there is I think recently we came across a situation where I believe I was told you can have a primary residential use and a primary agricultural use on the same parcel. Is that?
Well, we said you could establish the agricultural one first. There was nothing prohibiting that, but
Right.
that doesn't sound like it here.
we need in this, since we're including A1, AP, RA, and RR in our mentioning of what zones in these, that this needs to be an accessory use to a primary residential use, would need to at least be a statement saying, look, cattle ranchers, we're not really thinking of your,
No.
look at animal production in the next.
No, these are accessory uses to a residential use. So this really excludes the cattle ranchers in the community and other large livestock operations. That's not what this is
I understand
But
that,
it's
but
including those zones.
it includes those zones, which I think would get a bunch of people very excited.
well, yeah, and that's because you can have A1 zone parcels that are 5 acres in size.
Right.
I think I hear what you're saying, to add some clarification, cross-reference to the animal production for.
Yeah, I think
those.
so. It just that.
Yeah.
Just by including those zones, and I understand it's only as an accessory to a primary residential use, there needs to be something that set
Not on
people.
A1.
Clearly separates the two.
It is A1. I mean, they cite A1.
I'm just saying it doesn't make sense that on
Oh.
A1. I mean, that's primarily agricultural.
Yeah, well, I guess that's.
Well, we can actually exclude, I thought they
I
were
only see it in
excluded.
the R1, really, is in the header. Oh, here it is, in the GFTPA one, yeah, that doesn't seem
Yeah.
quite right.
And
And I
that-
think the RR is the weirdo zone in
Yeah.
which, is it closer to R1?
Yeah.
R1, or is it closer to RA?
Mhm.
It's that intermediate zone, and it seems like allowing people who own like on an R1 parcel, I think having it accessory to a primary residential use totally makes sense. In
Yeah.
an RR, I could see allowing somebody to have grazing livestock on that parcel prior to building a house, but limited by the size of the parcel.
Right.
So,
I mean, we can exclude, which actually makes more sense to me now that we're having the discussion and reading again. We can exclude A1 and AP and even RA if we wish.
That I think would get rid of a lot of concern.
yeah.
Well, it'll eliminate the confusion between MIA, bona fide commercial agricultural operation, or am I quote unquote animal keeping for, domestic.
Exactly. So take out the zones where it could be a commercial operation.
And I think if common sense were to prevail, in rural agriculture is different than RR, rural residential.
Right,
And on that note, I have a problem if we're gonna define, the equivalent of the equivalent animal unit is allowed per acre, then we go down to cattle, it's one animal. So if you have a 20-acre parcel in an RR zone, that means you're gonna put 20 cows? I'm bothered a little bit with, the idea of if someone does that and we say here it's allowable, what are we doing to those animals? Is animal control gonna come out and say, hey, or you're gonna spend an abundant amount of feed plus, I think about the issue we had down Dogtown Road. If you got a 10 or 20 acres area and you've got 20 cows on there, is that gonna impact the neighbors or the number of pigs? Is that
Right.
gonna impact the neighbors? So, maybe we need, Martha, I don't know if that's a standard that we just came up with, but, I think there needs to be a reasonableness here. When we talk about the number of animals allowed in an RR zone.
Yeah, I agree. I also think there's things like aviaries that could be entirely inside. You wouldn't even know that the animals that the birds were there. And there could be ones that had parrots and you would know they are there. So I just think And I also see, I'm off topic a little bit here, is that animal rescue versus animal sanctuary. Animal sanctuary, the animal plans to live out its life there.
We-
Animal
and
rescue,
it's
you
defined.
might have animals just there
Yeah.
for a short period.
Well, that's the intent of the animal rescue, is that they're adopting them out, but,
Right.
I mean, we've seen what those look like, and they can be quite, dense with livestock.
Right, I'm saying but the limits on
Right.
animal rescue versus animal sanctuary might be different, because the sanctuary, they're gonna be there a long period
Right.
of time, so that might allow a smaller number of animals. Whereas if you just rescued 5 horses, but they're only gonna be there 3 days, maybe that's less of an issue. But you'd have to have those limitations built. This seems exceedingly complicated.
Yes.
Public comment?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, first of all, I very much want to support your concept about avoiding lots of commercial uses in residential areas. Where I see a lot of complaints is where, one neighbor's selling eggs and one is selling cheese from their goats, and one, you end up having, people who thought they moved to a residential area on a sleepy little road, and all of a sudden it's no longer a sleepy little road. So I think that's a good instinct to follow. The second thing deals with the distinction between hens and fowl. I notice when you're talking about the 4,000 square foot minimum lot size, you allow hens, and I'm assuming that means not roosters.
Yes.
And I even would put in parentheses there, not roosters, because you've talked about interpreting the code in a very open way, and including things that are close. And so somebody might read hens and think that roosters are close. Below that, on 1 acre lots, you're allowing fowl. And I assume that includes roosters. If it includes roosters, some of you from District 2 may remember District 2 Chicken Man.
Yeah.
Who came into the Board of Supervisors every Tuesday to complain about the roosters next door. So you might want to rethink roosters on 1 acre lots. That's all.
Right, just to summarize what I think I've heard so far, just to make sure I'm tracking the conversation. Animal keeping, or animals in the GF, A1, AP, and RA zone should be taken out of this animal keeping and instead just in the animal production section. So then this domestic animals part really just applies in the RR zone
And maybe our, I think.
and maybe RA. So there's a question on that.
Yeah.
And then there is concern with the maximum number of animals listed and the types. You mentioned aviaries, somebody mentioned potbelly pigs. Is that concern that there's too many animals allowed or not enough? I wasn't sure.
I think too many.
Both.
Too many, okay.
Both, when we talk about pigs, I envision 300-pound animals. And, you can have
Well,
probably more than 5 pot-bellied pigs on I don't know, never having had one, never having known one very well.
I don't know that we can necessarily, I don't really want to start regulating weight and,
But that might be where we
Yeah.
get to the AUPs, et cetera.
Public comment?
Yeah.
I think what you might want to consider, rather than putting it on a per acre basis,
Yes.
maybe thinking about it as what is the appropriate number of animals for a single domestic use? As one of the commissioners mentioned, 1 cow and calf, or a couple of cows and calf, or 5 goats, probably okay for whether you're on a family on a 1 acre lot or a family on a 10 acre lot. But if you make it by acre and you just multiply them up, you could get an unwieldy number. So consider the appropriate level of domestic use for a family as opposed to, multiplying it by acre.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar, that it might not even be a straight line.
Right.
Because on a 1 acre lot, the residential development, the house, the garage, the ADU, the garden,
Right.
all of that's gonna take up most of that acre. They're gonna be very limited on how much livestock they should actually have there. But on a 5 acre lot might have all those same things, have more space, but then as you get bigger, you could start ending up with really big numbers of animals that aren't appropriate next door to the guy that's on the 1 acre lot. It's a tough one because
You
we have
raise,
such a variety of
Right.
parcel sizes throughout.
and
Well, I mean-
maybe we don't do it by parcel size, but we do by grazing size, and that requires individual look. But I mean, you raise a very good concern. I mean, I've got my house and I've got my swimming pool and I've got, my vegetable garden, and all of a sudden my
Now you
lot
have a
size is
little
1
more.
acre, but it's a 200 square foot square for the.
Why don't I get together with, the ag commissioner and or the farm advisor and, almost kind of start over. I mean, not from scratch, but, we can talk about that head to acre ratio or area, ratio and what that means for, some sort of reason. And then we'll have to decide where we want to apply that. I mean, we all know the challenges. I mean, you just use the rural residential zoning as an example, and all of Rancho Calaveras is zoned RR. They range in size of half-acre parcels up to 3-acre parcels. And then you have all of your Diamond 20, Circle 20, Bar 20 subdivisions, which are all 20 acres, and they're all zoned RR.
Right.
So I mean, the RR zone in itself is just such a wide range of, sizes and locations throughout the county. It makes it very difficult, but it is a residential zone, so,
But people
It's-
think they're buying a ranchette.
right.
Yes.
So that's.
Well, and that's the
gonna
problem we're
help us.
coming up with is,
Yeah, it feels like to me, like the hardest piece here is RR, because both the sizes and both depending on where you are in the county, what people's expectation of what their neighbors might be doing could be different.
right.
And we haven't even discussed kennels of 4
Yeah.
or more dogs. 4
The whole
or
kennel
more.
thing is a whole nother.
RR with more dogs than 4 in a kennel? Okay, it's allowed pursuant to administrative use.
20 acres.
20 acres is pretty acceptable, and you do have to have a kennel license for that.
Acre and a half.
And
But you have to have a kennel license too, so it's not like you can just look at the zoning code and say, oh yeah, I'm good to go.
The kennel license looks at the care of the animals.
Yeah.
It doesn't look at the
Doesn't look at the space.
nuisance factor.
Right.
And the only thing standing the defense of noise problems and everything else is the planning director here. That's administrative use permit is.
So Gina,
Required
were
in
these
the
numbers
R1
that you
zone.
and Martha came up with, or these are, obviously aren't numbers in our code?
No, they're not, no, we have no numbers in our current code.
Okay, so these were numbers that,
These are numbers that we came up with. I'm assuming, Martha, you probably robbed this from another code. And then we just kind of modified it as we saw fit.
Yeah, we looked at some other examples. And kind of came up with something we thought was maybe reasonable. I would say that's for the D and E. The private kennels, this is really your current code for that. But yes, on this, these are new.
I would tend to have, at least in the RR zone, have the same requirement you have for R1 on the private kennels, the administrative use permit. Because so much depends on the size of the parcel.
Well, and you have to remember, most of our RR zones commonly are about 7,000 square feet. I mean, they're all less than an acre,
Yeah.
the majority of them.
So that is a dip, right? It's-
But that's
so
why I think they
So
should be,
maybe we do need under the RR, it's like parcels less than,
Yeah.
parcels greater than, but specific to the RR
Right.
designation. It just seems like it's gonna get so broken down here trying to.
Well, it is, and, and we've just kind of, I mean, RR and RA, if you look at the zoning map in the county, they're like this, all over the place.
All over.
I mean, you'll have RR right next to RA, you'll have RR in the middle of a bunch of RA. I mean, it is just, it's almost like it's the same zone.
Right, when we thought that, I mean, when I think of RR, I think of it as, it should be your basic 1 acre parcels that people are, they're just a bigger
Right.
parcel. They're
Well,
not really.
I envision it as that buffer between your
Right.
town site, R1 zoned parcels, and your resource production. It's that mid-range before, between the high density or, residential uses versus your natural resource lands.
in RA just a bit
Is
more.
one step
Right,
more.
right, it's one step more,
I
but
think
we
that-
didn't, it's not the way it's applied, so
I think-
makes it a little
I think
difficult.
The chair's thought about dividing RR for these purposes, if we're gonna do it per acre or per grazing acre or whatever, we should take into consideration the size of the parcel. And back to the kennels, I think that administrative use permit, again, you need that approval in the R1 zone. I'd say in RR zones under a certain acreage, parcels under a certain acreage should require administrative use permit.
And again, it's, you don't want to punish the people who are no problem, because there are people who have lots of animals.
Right.
No, the neighbors wouldn't even know they have them.
No.
Because they're inside or in indoor kennels and they're well managed and
Yeah.
they're treated more like pets. And then there are the people who are overdoing it, or that their animals are outside all the time
Yeah.
and barking and
You
getting
could-
each other wound up and
You can have two dogs that are destroying
That are,
the
yeah.
serenity of a neighborhood.
yes, exactly. And somebody else has 8 dogs and you don't even know it.
Mhm.
So,
Public comment question?
sure.
Gina, how expensive is it to get an AUP? And how long does it take to get an AUP? What is the burden on people getting those?
I want to say an AUP is like $3,000-ish. And, it depends on workload, but, I mean, it's generally they're administrative projects, and so if they're not, subject to CEQA, which I think most aren't, well, okay, we won't go there, sorry, Julie. Then, I mean, and that really is the component, is if it's something that's subject to CEQA, of course, it's gonna take longer. But, generally speaking, maybe 3 months to 5 if it's something that requires a CEQA analysis.
Right, so we might be careful when we're putting that on someone who has 5 chickens. But
I think
You
that's
know,
why
so-
we're trying to quantify what could be
Right.
allowed and then have
That's right.
something over and above that require an
Right.
AUP.
Right,
right,
except when you get,
We can do a little more research, I know.
I guess.
That's to be expected. I kind of figured this was probably going to be the problem area. I mean, we struggled with it. I'll be honest with you, we struggled with it because, we are an agricultural county and, there's lots of people that have, small livestock operations, on their residential parcels.
Reach out to a couple people who have kennel licenses and maybe some people who have smaller home-based agricultural operations and get input, invite them to be here.
In sanctuaries and rescue situations.
I have one other suggestion. And this is we'll probably cover this when we deal with the administrative section of the code, but I'm going to introduce it here. I hope you'll consider in some place in this administrative procedures, some mechanism for neighbors mediating some of these disputes. Codes are great and they can do a lot, but there will still be these conflicts.
Oh, yeah.
And I hate to be the one who fields the calls, and then have to tell them, guys, have you actually met with your neighbors and maybe a mediator and talk this out so that maybe you can come with some accommodation? And often it actually works. So I hope you think about incorporating something like that formally, because I know that other attorneys don't do what I just said and just, make it a confrontational adversarial situation. But anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
So, Gina, I guess I'm back to advocating for the animals. There was a gentleman cited on Highway 4 years ago because the cows were eating dirt and you could see their ribs sticking out of their sides. So I'm going to advocate that whatever we do, we all have this perception, I'm going to move up here and I'm going to have whatever, but I'm not sure that common sense prevails. And I think, we need to be, I want to be the voice, I guess, of the animals because, be it horses or cows or whatever. I mean, nobody wants to see when you drive by nothing for those cows to eat except dirt.
Right.
And I've seen it in a number of locations because there's way more animals on that than there should be.
Right. And I'm also going to recommend that in addition to talking or having people who do run these kinds of places come to this meeting, that we also talk to animal control, because they would have a lot of stories to tell.
Find out where the
We
complaints are.
need to understand exactly what they've seen out there and how we can better regulate these industries. Some people start with very good intentions, and then things kind of get out of control, and it impacts other neighbors.
Yet there are people with good intentions that have terrible situations for animals.
Absolutely.
And they love the animals.
Absolutely.
But don't see the problem.
Yeah.
Kind of
So,
contrary to my early, previous thought or existing code that you could have established an agricultural ranching use on your parcel first. I might actually think that it's appropriate that there be a home there first, because I remember when I lived in Mountain Ranch, there were animals that were left out there and there was really nobody coming to check on them very often. So they were on, a few acres, but really they weren't getting adequate care. The hooves weren't getting trimmed, the flies were, it just wasn't a good situation. And if someone's living there, and I'm not talking on the primarily agricultural.
No,
land.
that's
I'm talking about on R1 or R1 or RA, I'm iffy on, but RR specifically. But again, that's the size of the parcel and what kind of operation they're doing.
Right.
And
So,
we can't really legislate.
yeah, so
Common
animal
sense.
keeping is an accessory use, and that's first and foremost under animal keeping is only allowed as an accessory use to a primary residential use, so,
But which is why we have to take out all the ones that are
Right,
primarily.
right. That's noted.
But yeah, I've sort of come around. I thought, really, who cares, somebody wants to run a little bit of cattle on their property. Well, if it's 20 acres, that kind of makes sense. And that's the
Yeah.
problem is that.
If it's a 3-acre parcel in the middle of Rancho Calaveras and you've just dumped 30, 40 head,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah,
problem.
That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happened.
That's a problem.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I just realized it's 3:30, and I don't know where you would think about ending, because what we have in front of us are just basically regulations for different types of land uses. We've got emergency shelters, we've got home occupations, we've got farmers markets and employee housing and things of that nature. So I don't know where it is you might find to be a comfortable spot to stop so that we can pick it up again, but it's getting near.
I thought we were gonna go to 4. That's what
Yeah, I think we should try to plan to go to 4 or, a little before. So, and I think we can leave this issue for Gina and
Yeah,
Martha
yeah.
to contemplate a little more.
We'll take another stab at
I
it.
definitely do not think this is like, oh, throw this out and start over. I think this really facilitated having that conversation because we could see some
Right,
ideas.
right. Well, and that's really where we wanted, what we wanted to do, because like I said, the current code is just absent any regulation, which is just leaves people to think it's a free-for-all, and we don't really have any enforcement. So, when somebody calls up and says, hey, can I have livestock in an R1 zone in the middle of a residential subdivision, we have to say, well, accepted farming practices are allowed, although we don't recommend it, and then you end up with a nuisance complaint.
One basic question that I didn't really get clear the other week. You have somebody that has the current zoning and it has current ownership of a parcel. Right now, they don't have any sheep on the parcel. And we do the zoning change. And there is a restriction on how many sheep
Right.
they can have, or that can be on a parcel. Would that person be restricted? Is it the use? the actual
Absolutely.
Use of the sheep? Would
So
they be
it-
limited to the number of sheep they had out on that?
Had? No, they have to have them.
Well, I know.
I mean, it has to be an
If they
existing
already
use.
Had them, they couldn't take, and it was over the amount that will
Yeah.
be allowed.
So it's an existing use of the property.
Yeah, including the number.
Right,
Because-
then, we would consider that to be a pre-existing legal non-conforming use. The problem is how do you establish what was pre-existing? I mean, it's not like a building permit that has a date on it, or a business license that you can tell when it was issued, that kind of a thing. So it's kind of a little gray area, but we would like to say, yes, if you can clearly demonstrate that those animals were on the property and that it wasn't previously, I mean, and I don't know, I mean, maybe a nuisance factor plays in.
But we're
But
talking,
if they have been the subject of multiple complaints.
That might be,
That's
yeah,
gonna change that
Right.
situation.
yeah.
So,
Is it?
and just the, state law on pre-existing uses, I mean, we have policy decision, right now as a county, as a policy decision, we allow people to, we're generous about non-conforming uses. You're allowed to add regulations that didn't exist before, even if it reduces a use, as long as it's within constitutional limits and doesn't totally, take away all economic value. Now, the policy again tends to be generous about that, but if something became a concern, you could add regulations that would restrict an existing use.
Especially if it was necessary to protect the economic interest of the neighbors.
Could be, yeah.
or the health of the animals.
Animals.
So there isn't really a hard and fast,
Right,
I would very much appreciate a page-long memo. Talking about this.
I can do a memo for like a separate attorney-client privilege memo on non-conforming uses. When you look at the section that addresses non-conforming uses, you could also consider whether you want to keep it the same. That is, I think, going to be addressed as a section in a separate portion of this code.
Oh, well, maybe-
And the
maybe we'll
commission
wait till
could
then.
consider from a policy perspective, how it wishes to address them there as well, just generally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, maybe we wait until we get to that proposed language, because it's confusing to me. I mean, somebody that's currently running 2 sheep, or say, 5 sheep on the property and on his 1 acre of grazing land. And he wants to run more, but the new code would limit him to 5. It sounds as if he would be limited to 5. And it's not that he's using it to graze sheep, he's using it to graze 5 sheep.
Right.
But it's really gonna all, like everything else, it's gonna be based on a neighbor complaining.
Yeah.
Because we're not going out and counting the sheep.
No.
And also, it's different to have 5 sheep that are there all the time, 5 sheep that you're just fattening up for a short period of time, 5 sheep that you're raising for 4-H, because you have 5 children and they each wanna take a lamb, you know? So it's just,
It's tough.
it only gets more complicated the more you think about it.
Stop thinking.
So,
Anyway, thank you for taking it on,
Yes.
and thank you for taking it back.
Yeah,
and I think if we look at animal production, it's much simpler, but I don't know that I am in a position to say whether those are the right numbers.
These are your existing,
Yeah.
this is existing.
and just so you might feel a little reassured, this was the section that was added when, back in the day, when we actually had a committee of agriculturals throughout the county. And we did have a consultant at the time, so I feel confident that these are, accurate numbers. No, we haven't had an issue with it. Mm-mm.
But there are no limitations here on cattle or sheep or goats or whatever. One suggestion I would have is at the end of the first sentence under A, saying the following animal production operations are permitted as accessory to primary agricultural uses. Or,
They
Huh?
are the.
They are.
Be the prime.
That's the primary use of the property.
okay, right? So you can have, I thought you could have, this is where I get confused. You could have an AP where the primary use is residential.
In the AP zone?
No.
No, ag preserve is,
No, I'm sorry, not Ag Preserve, but A1.
no, so the A1 zone is our prime agricultural
I
zone.
understand that, and I guess, once again, I've got to I should be squared away on this. But if someone has a land that's zoned A1, and they have a house on it, and they're not doing any agriculture on it, why, the primary use of that property is designated by the zone or by the actual use?
I would say by the zone,
By the zone, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
that-
No, that doesn't prohibit you from living on the
Okay, I
parcel
should
and
note
not,
Yeah.
but it is zoned as the primary, prime agricultural
Even if all they use
resource.
it for is to look
Yeah.
at the land and
Right.
Right,
commute
they-
to Stockton.
We're not gonna force
Have
you,
to have a house.
we're not gonna force you to raise those pigs
No.
or the roosters.
Big pigs.
Thank you, yes,
Those big pigs and those loud roosters.
thank you. Okay,
They're smart, though.
okay, so we don't need the language I was talking about.
So would you think we can talk about camping, campgrounds, and RV parks? I have a feeling that one's going to become, well, let's talk about it. I think it plays in a little bit to the whole tiny house RV thing, which could extend that discussion.
Just to give some context to this, these are your current
Yeah,
regulations.
thank you.
That they seem reasonable to me. And I think it's a balance of, the various neighborhood concerns that might happen, I think are taken care of here.
Let's take a closer look at these regulations because this issue came up today. In the RA zone, to do camping, even if it's done in conjunction with some kind of agricultural operation, requires a CUP. So when I'm looking at these at 17-12-080A, we're saying that on parcels 5 acres or more in the GFTP, A1, APRA, and RR zones, that camping outside of designated areas, either in a recreation vehicle or other shelter or means is allowed for a continued period of up to 14 days in conjunction, or a cumulative period not to exceed 30 days in one calendar year. And then if you look at the B section, which is a campground and RV parks, I mean, that's something totally different. But what really strikes me about camping and the way that we regulated them currently is that we restrict camping for a specific reason that I don't understand. And I'm trying to figure out whether historically we've had issues with camping and campgrounds, because people come to Calaveras County for, you know, the open space and the beauty, and it's just a natural thing for people to want to have that type of operation. And it happens more often than we know. There are some that have become problematic, but are we regulating them because of the history we've had with camping, or are we just regulating them because we don't want to encourage them? Because
No, actually, it's just the opposite. I mean, I think this language came about as a means to allow flexibility for those people who wanted to commence in, you know, some sort of a camping activity outside of public lands. So, I mean, I think traditionally your campground will be either in a recreational zone, or it'll be on public lands, you know, near a lake or up in the forest, that's managed either by the Forest Service or, you know, some other governmental entity. But this kind of allows people to have campgrounds, private campgrounds in areas that are not your traditional.
Private campsites.
Right.
So, yeah, and we've had a few people have goes at doing things like this. And right now, there's the whole hip camp movement.
Right.
That is actually being promoted by the state under their tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think, you know, in many counties, they're promoting these hip camps, which are these hip camps. So
yeah.
they're small scale camping on a largish parcel that might have something else going on. I mean, it could be an agricultural parcel. It could be, it just has
A bicycle
land.
race track kind of a thing.
Maybe they have.
They're like tent cabins.
Well, they could be
Not
that too. I mean, they've got,
necessarily.
I mean, they're all in
Bring
different
their
kinds of
own.
forms. I mean,
Yeah.
they're platform structures, they're,
Yeah.
you know, it takes on all kinds of names, whether it's glamping or, like you said, hip
Exactly.
camp, or, you know, I mean, they've all got something unique about them, and everyone's, it's like all the, you know, the rage. And we get a lot of calls. We get a lot of calls from people out of the area that are looking to buy property up here and move, and to operate a business, you know, that will help, you
That
know,
will allow camping.
that will allow camping, and, you know, something that they can engage into and earn a living from.
And sometimes it's like people have some kind of a home craft business, or like the Dude Ranch and homestay thing. So, and they want to allow camping as part of that, not just in a
Right,
lodge or
right.
in the house or
But
whatever.
this would allow it. It doesn't say just one
We'd have to go back
campsite.
and look
We
at
have to go
all the
back and
different
look.
zones to see how it would be
I mean,
allowed.
but with a limit of 14 days, it seems to me that
Well,
fits within
that
what
would,
you're talking about.
no,
No,
so
not at all.
that is
Year-round
your private property.
Yeah,
So you own a piece of property in Sheep Ranch, but you live in San Francisco. And you want to come up on the weekend with your family, with your RV, and you want to stay on that parcel, vacant parcel of land in Sheep Ranch, you can do that as the owner of that property.
I don't see where this limits this to owners of the property. It's just,
well, but it's 14 days or 30 days in a calendar year is not a business operation, and we're
No.
talking about business
well,
operations.
no, but that's for an individual, the way I read this.
No,
Somebody in their camper can have up to 14 days or a cumulative period not to exceed 30 days in one calendar year. I don't see where this says
I thought the
I-
old,
only the owner.
yeah, my understanding is that was the limitation for that property.
I thought the current definition specifically said you can camp on your private property.
Well, this
So-
This doesn't say that
Yeah, this doesn't
exactly,
say
but
that.
that.
No, it
That's
doesn't.
what I read because that's what I believe.
Well,
Oh, I think we should add that.
if that's, I mean, that's what I think, that's what my understanding is the intent of this, camping outside of designated camping areas. If this is what we say in existing code, but I am pretty certain that there's additional language in here that we
Well,
somehow
then, in that
left
case, we
out.
need to address camping as relates to agritourism.
Right.
Are we allowing, we allow agritourism, and we allow camping as part of agritourism, but again, it says it has to be done with a conditional use permit if it's located in an RR, or RA or RR zones. So, go ahead, please.
I think that's to protect the neighbors, but,
Martha?
yeah.
So can I just back up to A first before I think we go on to the larger camping thing? So your current code for this section, actually, the title is camping on private property.
Right.
And then the highlighted area is word for word. So to correct what I said earlier, this is new, the size limitation and the zone limitation. And Gina, so clarifying, the camping on private property is the title. You interpret that to
Okay.
mean an owner can camp on their property. Is that how
That's-
it's?
That's how we have interpreted that section since I've been here.
Years.
So for 27 years, that's how we have interpreted that section of code.
But shouldn't there be a sentence there that really
Well,
clarifies that?
Yeah, I think that's what we're missing because we changed the title.
Change the title.
And so, yeah, we can certainly add that to make it very clear that it is
Two
a,
different things,
a
right?
property owner occupant kind of a
So
thing.
Then
what,
we get back to. your concern.
camping as part of agritourism is, you can find that in section 1706.1051. It talks about agritourism, but also talks about camping being specifically required as a conditional use to agritourism. We allow agritourism, but we allow camping as a CUP. So my question is, are we allowing camping as a CUP because of history? Or are we just arbitrarily identifying a conditional use as a process for camping? Because if somebody is doing agritourism and we describe all the activities under the sun that you could actually have in conjunction with that, but we say, oh, no, but when it comes to camping, you need a CUP. So what about camping do we consider to have that necessitates having a conditional use when you flip the page, we have all these regulations that tell you what a campground or what camping should consist of. We already have those regulations in there. So what is the benefit of the CUP?
So it seems to me like we're missing category. So we have our old category on your private property, you can camp 30 days a year on your own property. And then it seems like we need a camping outside of designated camping areas that we might allow.
Yeah.
That is exactly what you're saying about. So you're as part of your agritourism, or part of whatever your piece of property is, but it's not developed as a campground or an RV park.
Right.
But you would allow scattered camping on it up to some number of
That makes
them, and with whatever.
Facility.
But yeah, whatever requirements we're gonna put on that. And then we have campgrounds and RV parks that is a much more formal situation. It just feels like we're kind of missing that in-between piece. But I think that there are a lot of things to consider about that in-between piece and fire safety.
Right.
So,
Well, and traffic generation is one thing too. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of our county roads that are substandard roads, and you have to take into consideration how much additional traffic you want to be able to put onto those roads from a safety and an upkeep standpoint.
right, and the whole question of if you allow it in RR, is that an imposition on the neighbors? Now you have random campers
Right.
out there, they
Right.
might not like that in RR, so you might
Well-
need larger parcels for that.
Right, and at least the use permit process will engage neighbors into the process. So, you know, you can get,
So I think we need to go back to the table that we have looked at and the boxes that check what types of
Yeah.
uses to see if there's consistency between this statement and those uses that we've checked to be permitted, not permitted, because you're going to find inconsistencies between those boxes and this particular statement. So we're not looking at that table at this particular point, but
Right.
let us make sure that we haven't, if I remember correctly, we prohibit camping in some specified zones on that table, and here we're saying we're allowing them.
so why don't I go ahead,
Comment?
real quick, Tom, hang on. Why don't
He's
we go,
absolutely,
Gina, go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
he's absolutely, Director Elliott's absolutely correct. Camping is not allowed in the TP, the AP, or the RA, meaning campgrounds and formal campgrounds, RV parks. It is allowed in the general forest and the A1 only with the CUP.
Right,
So just for clarification, are you saying that the tables are inconsistent with this?
Is that-
I'm not sure. So, because this is for campgrounds, this is saying where campgrounds are allowed pursuant to the tables, these standards apply. So I'm confused as where you're seeing the discrepancy.
I'm referring to A, camping outside of designated camp.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's not a campground,
right.
an RV park. This is just, as Gina said, so,
it's a general statement.
yeah.
So
That's
we're not finding camping outside of designated camping areas enumerated in the table because we've already said it's allowed for this length of time in these specific zones.
But it seems like we would like to have an interim thing that would accommodate maybe a different, so we have the private situation on your own, that's limited by the 14 to 30 day thing. But maybe we need one that allows more days as part of a commercial operation. That's not a formal campground and RV park. But it's not gonna be allowed on RA and RR possibly, you know, we need to look at that, where that really fits in. And then we would need to go back, which is I think what our planning director and Tom are saying is, and we need to see how would that play out as to which zones it would be allowed in and whether there's.
So you're saying you want yet
another.
another definition?
I'm saying if we're gonna allow that hip camp thing,
Why can't that be
type of
included in campgrounds and RV parks?
I think that that's a different situation than what
It
we're talking about. This, to me, campgrounds and RV parks, like it's the developed
Campsite A, B, C.
campground, yeah, with here's site. We assign you to this site, and if we want to do that, but I mean, it's something that's actually happening all over already.
Right.
So would we want to create some guardrails for it?
And do state regulations, would they give us a model for what we might want to do? I mean,
I doubt
are
it.
they encouraging this?
They're encouraging it, but it's
they're
the
not saying what it
tourism
is.
industry that's encouraging
Yeah.
it. And it's very popular, like where people go, say there's, I don't know, they make something on the property, like woodworking or something.
That's-
And the people have 20 acres and they do woodworking classes. So well, instead of just offering, you can come and stay in our house, they say there's room for 6 people to camp on the property.
So, I mean, if you're looking at the regulation, I mean, it's all pretty necessary stuff. I mean, it talks about sewage disposal
Right.
and water and
Exactly.
fire safety, and so I guess I'm not understanding why we should, are we saying we want to create a campground use that doesn't necessarily require all of these?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, but they might be slightly different, or we need to change B to describe it a little differently and then go back and check where it's allowed and not allowed. Because we allow camping outside of designated camping areas in the first one, everywhere with no guardrails on it.
Well, but if we're specifically saying, you, the
Now-
owner of that property, which was the intent, and it just didn't come through, and we're gonna change that. But you, the owner of a piece of property that you bought up in Calaveras County, and you wanna come spend the weekend with your kids in the RV, that's acceptable,
Right, I don't have any issue with that.
right?
I'm looking at that in-between use that is not a big formal campground, but.
Well, I mean, we're not saying you have to provide 100 spaces.
No, I'm.
You know, I mean, it can be as
Peter's point.
small and intimate as you want,
What?
as long as you're providing adequate sewage disposal and you've taken into consideration, you know, access and fire safety and
what
so on
under
and so
B
on.
would you not require?
I mean,
I-
are there
I'm
things
thinking
that you,
but I'm just,
are you envisioning that wouldn't be required with this in-between camping?
not necessarily, I mean,
Like,
I do think this is also a larger discussion because I think essentially what I'm hearing is some mechanism of allowing some transit occupancy associated with certain activities or businesses potentially
right,
through
exactly,
people sleeping outside.
right.
But if we're gonna allow that, Martha, we should also make sure that they follow whatever we're saying in B, that they have sewage and water and stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
I agree. I think you need to consider that. I think
Right.
you also need to consider what types of businesses and activities they may be associated. I think you need to consider how many spaces. I think you need to consider how long, maybe a minimum. That's what I mean. I think it is a larger discussion that I would think it would be very difficult to draft up this interim thing within the exercise that we're doing.
Oh, I'm not thinking we're gonna do it today.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we're gonna quit here momentarily. This is gonna be a placeholder discussion,
Right.
once we all go back and think about it, and then
I think
it will
Martha's
require a
saying,
little more.
Martha, I believe, is saying, let's get this zoning done and then consider things like that. Is that, am I putting?
What
words
I'm
in your-
hearing is this is
That's my
much,
recommendation.
yeah, this is a much larger, kind of like special events and short-term vacation rentals.
Well, I'm not sure that it needs to
Public
be. I
comment?
think we could accommodate it to some extent in B by just looking at how we characterize what a campground is.
Okay,
So if you've got think about it over the
Yeah.
weekend, shoot me an email and give me some ideas of what's
Let me think
going on
about
in your
it.
head.
I think, it's just that I know it's happening, and so when we know
And
things
I-
are happening and we're not,
Yeah,
No, I agree.
we're turning our, like, "Ah, I don't want to know about it."
right.
It also might fit into resort and retreat center, which is,
Yes.
also tries to cover those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
I want to get back to A. Martha, I think, said that the acreage provision and the zone designation provisions are new. So do we want to change so that you can't do this in an R1 zone or in anything that's
What's not
less
in
than
our-
5 acres or more? 5 acres or more is a pretty radical change. And of course, it's gonna raise the existing use thing of, well, for the last 20 years, I've come up here, but when you changed the zoning thing, I wasn't here, you know, or some question.
Yeah, I
from-
think maybe we want to go back and look at what we had before on the private property for your personal
and if you own the
use kind
property,
of thing.
yeah.
And maybe you will allow, maybe you discriminate a little bit in there that you allow it to be used more often on larger parcels and less often on smaller parcels or something. I don't know how big of an issue it is. But I know a lot of people do that. They buy property, they come up and they they park their RV or they camp
Yeah.
on their property a month in the summer, you know?
Yeah.
It'd be nice, I mean, I'm sure I can find the existing ordinance, but it'd be nice to see it.
And it probably doesn't even say what we say, it's just
Yeah.
what we've all understood.
Yeah. You're right. So-
Unfortunately.
Right.
I'm looking the existing code right now, and the highlighted text is what it says. The title is camping on private property. And then camping outside of desert, and then the highlighted text.
I don't see highlighting on this, so I'm.
Right up here.
No, up on the screen.
Oh, up there, I'm sorry.
Yeah. She's doing it in real time for us.
It's literally a title and one sentence.
Yeah.
So, again, seems like most of it's here, it just needs a little bit of thinking about it.
Okay, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like,
let's-
I imagine that, I know that there are wineries that have space that's not in production, and they have space and they allow people to camp on the property. Of course, they have all those other things that we talk about in B, it's not like
Right.
they don't have any sanitary facilities or,
Yeah, they do.
you know, they're
Yeah.
feeding people on the property and they have showers.
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at how this section relates to camping as part of agritourism. And if you defined agritourism as somebody's personal property where they can do these particular types of things, agritourism allows people to camp who are not residents of the property, who are not owners of the property, or who are coming to the property for the benefit of learning how to milk a cow or whatever it is you do during those processes. So we need to be able to link those two together so that we're
Turn a
not.
bowl, well, I don't know,
Right.
whatever it is that
Yeah.
they know how to do, right?
Right.
It's not necessarily just agriculture.
Right. I mean, it could be winery related. Agritourism covers a wide range of things, but yeah.
Well, I was thinking crafts kinds of things, I don't know, things that people do, and thank you, everybody, so we'll see you back
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Do we have to, I make a motion to continue.
Thank you.
And there will be, I could do this as a commissioner report or whatever, but there will be, in response to comments particularly received from the agricultural commissioner, there will be a few minor changes suggested to the GHGRP measures themselves.
Okay.
So that will be probably on Thursday, because on
Yes.
Thursday we have it as a recurring
Right, right.
item,
No,
right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
That's what I meant to talk about.
yeah. Okay, well, that's good, we understood. So we have a motion to continue, and
I second.
Aye,
all in favor? Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? No. And see you back here on Wednesday at 9 a.m. We got a whole new section to look ahead to, should we actually get through the rest of this.
The update in the code will precede what we.
I'm sorry.
She's
I'm
wondering
checked out.
In what order the.
Yeah, I don't blame you, never mind.
I was paying attention to turning off my computer and I thought you were talking amongst yourselves.
That's okay. No,
Yeah, we'll talk about the order after.
Okay.
Are there any reports that?
Thank you, Martha,
Thank you,
if
Martha.
you're still there.
Any commissioner reports or planning director reports before I adjourn this meeting by banging my gavel that I never do? We're adjourned then. Thank you.